across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 7 o'clock and there's so much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Thank you for your company. It's the biggest day of bombardments in Iran. We'll talk about the war there. Also, the confusing messages coming from the White House. Is it over or coming to an end, or is it just beginning? Because the President was asked, you said the war is very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning, so which is it? A reporter asked him. The president said, you could say both, so which is it? Confusing messages too coming from Reform UK, who seem to have wanting to join the war and then wanting to not be part of it. We'll look at some of the clips and the criticism that Labour has had of them. We'll also talk about criticism of the government, particularly when it comes to jury trials. We're expecting a vote very, very soon on that. The government should carry their legislation, but actually there will be many Labour MPs who rebel against it. We'll talk about that as time goes on this evening. We'll also talk about, not just about the war in Iran, but also about whether Green MPs are going to defect to Labour, about digital ID and what you think of that. A free speech row about Islamophobia, the former government advisor on political violence, will talk to us about that. And in London, bleed kit rollouts. Peter Blexley, the former Metropolitan Police detective, will join us about this. If you need a bleed kit, this is basically if someone gets stabbed. Well, they're being rolled out in various parts of London, and it shows, I think, the real danger that can be in that capital city. We'll talk about migration. We'll talk about the Iranian women's football team and the defections there. Where's Gary Lineker? Where's Ian Wright? Where are all these people, the lionesses, when they care about human rights? Where are all these people talking about those Iranian women? Well, they're not. They're very, very, very quiet on all of this. We'll also talk about whether crufts should be banned. You can guess what I think about that. And also about the show's winner. He was convicted of animal cruelty 20 years ago. We'll also talk about ducks being shot. Yes, really. Horrendous cruelty that is happening there. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note on that same number. Keep it to less than a minute if you would. You can also pick up the phone and make a phone call, and we can talk live on air. 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, let's hear what Donald Trump has been saying on the Iran war perhaps ending soon.
You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
very soon. Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. In fact, there are two levels of leadership, and even actually, as it turns out, more than that. But two levels of leadership are gone. Most people have never even heard about the leaders that they're talking about. So it's obviously been very, very powerful, very effective.
Donald Trump talking at the White House earlier. He's also been asked, you said the war is very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning, so which is it? He said you could say both. Very confusing situation with all of that. He's talked about having a very good call with Vladimir Putin as well, and about sinking Iranian Navy ships too. Let's speak to Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO commander. He's also a mayoral candidate for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight for Reform UK. Good evening, Chris.
Yeah, hi, Peter.
Which is it with Donald Trump? Do we know what's going on here? Because Pete Hegseth appears to be saying one thing and Trump appears to be saying another. What do you think is going on here?
So, I mean, it's all part of the information campaign that's going on right now. It's designed to influence all sorts of audiences, both at home and abroad. So we need to look at what people are doing rather than what they're saying at the moment. This always happens in the middle of wars. So it's designed to confuse. It's designed to make the enemy guess what's going on in other people's heads. So we just got to put up with it right now. What has happened, President Trump is right. They've destroyed the Iranian Navy. They've got air supremacy over the whole of Iran, which is a big country, so they're doing really well. We haven't heard much from the Iranian army. And of course, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps have been pounded. what I'm seeing at the moment, Peter, is the military objectives have probably been achieved, but the political objectives have not been achieved.
And on that note, actually, Chris, do you think that Donald Trump really cares about regime change, or is this just about making Iran a non-nuclear country and making sure that it can't develop nuclear weapons? Because some of that was done in the summer, obviously, with those Israeli and American strikes. But he says different things, and maybe that's part of the disinformation campaign as well, about whether there should actually be regime change. What's your view of all of this?
Peter, what I think is going on here is that the Americans want to take the Iranians away from this very cozy group of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. There's a very close relationship with China, particularly in view of the amount of oil and gas that goes to China. And I think this is a big power play to take Iran off the board, just in the same way that the oil-rich state of Venezuela was taken off the board. This is basically about China. It's not about Iran. And so I think bringing Iran into, if we say, the free world is probably the big strategic agenda here, so that you can actually remove them from that autocratic bloc, which, of course, we've been looking at for the last 3 years, perhaps.
Just expand on that point about China. They obviously get a huge amount of oil from Iran. We were talking about that a little bit last night. They supply lots of cyber security and operating systems to Iran as well. Is the Trump plan, do you think, take out Iran and then be in a stronger position with China? And how does that fall into where things are with Russia as well?
Well, I think Russia's relationship with Iran has decayed pretty progressively since the start of the Ukraine war. I think, Peter, everybody knows that quite a lot of the Shahed drones have been put up to Russia. They're being used in Ukraine right now. So Russia's in dire need of the sort of technology that can come from Iran. Of course, they originally come from China in component form. But I think people in the UK underestimate the closeness of the relationship between China and Iran. It's been going on for 30 years. It's a personal and a political relationship. I once went to visit an admiral in the south of China, and he said, look, I was going to talk to you for an hour, but actually I can only talk to you for 15 minutes because I'm working on a railway project in Myanmar with my Iranian opposite number. And that shows you, I mean, that's a long time ago, 15 years ago. And so this relationship is very, very tight. Almost all the white goods that are in Iran come from China. And as I said, all the energy exports go back the other way. And it's a vital conduit. Now, if President Trump can control the energy output from Venezuela and from Iran, then he's got basically China by the throat in economic terms.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you. We're just going to go live to the House of Commons where they have the vote after the jury trials vote. I'll come back to you in a second, Chris, but let's just hear what the Commons are saying.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No.
So they're going to a vote in the House of Commons. They'll have a division, what's called there. They have 8 minutes to go through those different lobbies. We'll bring you the vote there. There could be not necessarily a defeat for the Labour government on the jury trials bill, but the Courts and Tribunals bill, as it's called, but the jury bill, essentially, are we going to curb jury trials in the UK? But there could be quite a big rebellion. Certainly Carl Turner and others will be rebelling on that. As soon as we know the result of that, we will bring it to you. Let me go back to Chris Parry. Sorry to interrupt the interview there, and thank you for your patience, Chris. I just want to talk to you a little bit more about China and about their view here, because of course they are a very industrialized nation, but they need a lot of oil and they need to build up oil reserves. So given the movement of oil, we keep hearing about the Straits of Hormuz and others and other parts of the world as well where the oil goes backwards and forwards, how much leverage do you think Trump could have over China if he gets what he wants in Iran?
Yeah, quite a lot of leverage, because he'll be able to control the oil price, which is the issue. I think China's going to be happy with any regime in Iran that continues to provide the oil and gas. And I think they're looking to see what's going to happen afterwards. They will only intervene, I think, in the Middle East, and they've got a very powerful fleet, of course, only if that supply looks to be interrupted. Now, as far as I can see, Chinese vessels aren't being attacked and aren't being threatened as they go through the Straits of Hormuz. So that looks like, from the Iranian point of view, they want to continue that. Obviously, they get the money back from it as well. But I think if the Americans want to keep the Chinese out, they'll ensure that that flow of oil and gas continues despite what is going on in the Straits of Hormuz. So if the Iranians aren't attacking Chinese ships, that's fine. If they need ships from other countries and flags to do it, then it's up to the Americans to maintain that flow, not just for China, of course, but all those of us who rely on the price of oil remaining stable.
Absolutely. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. And actually, your party, Reform UK, were talking about the price of oil today. They've been attacked by Labour for changing their mind on Iran. Let's just see what Farage said, Nigel Farage, your party leader, said on a stance on Iran earlier. This was a Reform press conference a few days ago. Let's see what happened there.
Well, I tell you what, given that we can't even send a Royal Naval vessel to defend British sovereign territory at an RAF base, we certainly don't have the capability to offer anything of any value to the Americans or the Israelis. So defending the base, recognising the catastrophe that is now the Royal Navy, and by the way, President Macron is really, frankly, showing the humiliating state that we've sunk to today with his very decisive actions and his intention to help clear the Straits of Hormuz. And the other point is protecting British citizens. I think so far the government have hired one charter plane, and even that broke down and was 24 hours late. So yes, we should never, ever, ever have said no to the Americans using the bases, particularly Diego Garcia. And interestingly, Mauritius have been very, very clear they would not have allowed that base to be used at all.
But that seemed to be in slight contrast to what Farage said on the 5th of March, Thursday last week. Let's take a look at that.
And now we find ourselves humiliated. What was for centuries the greatest naval nation on earth is now unable for up to a fortnight to send a Type 45 to Cyprus to defend, and remember this, British sovereign territory.
So, Chris, let me just read you what Anna Turley, the chairwoman of the Labour Party, has said to this. She said, going to war is the most serious decision a Prime Minister can make. Nigel Farage spent the past week calling for escalation that would make cost of living pressures even worse. If he had been Prime Minister, he would have already dragged our country into this war, says Ms Turley, and wouldn't be able to U-turn like he has done today. While Keir Starmer offers serious level-headed leadership in the national interest, Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch have shown themselves to be unfit for office. Nigel Farage, I mean, you may agree or disagree with what Labour says. I imagine you disagree. But Nigel Farage's tune does seem to be changing, does it not?
Well, I think the tactical picture changed. I think if you take it all together, I mean, I'm used to Anna Turley putting out these sort of formatted sort of complaints about reform and every other.
But he is saying different things. It's not just about Anna Turley. It's about what Nigel Farage is saying, is it not, Chris?
No, I don't think so. I think
he's saying different things.
What he's saying basically, and what I would have advised him to say, is there's been a catastrophic failure to anticipate the consequences of the Americans and Israelis taking action in the Gulf. And, you know, I've been in these situations myself. I've been Director of Operations in the Ministry of Defense, and we would have gone to the politicians very early and said, look, if the Americans and the Israelis are going to do this sort of thing, then this is what you have to consider. British citizens in the Gulf, British citizens in the Eastern Mediterranean, and these are the options that we have for you. Now, what Mr. Farage is also complaining about is the pitiful state of the Royal Navy. As a veteran, I have to tell you, I have never seen it so bad. Let me tell you, Peter, on the day the Argentinians invaded the Falklands, my ship, HMS Antrim, off Gibraltar, was 98% stocked for war. Weapons, fuel, and stores. And we have the prospect here of all 6 Type 45s not available to deploy. Now, I can tell you, in 1982, we had 11 ships at high readiness between 1 and 2 days' notice at the height of the Cold War, and now we're in a, they say, a more dangerous situation, and we have nothing like it. I live in Portsmouth, and I'm afraid part of the landscape is Type 45 destroyers. They sit alongside all the time. When they do go out, they do a great job. but we're using 4 or 5 ships to just maintain one at sea. That is not a great sea power. And I think that's what Mr. Farage was getting at. It's this failure to anticipate the fact that the Navy is not a responsive tool right now. And he pointed out that the French have put an aircraft carrier and 8 escorts out there to deal with this crisis. They're showboating, of course they are, because they love it, because we're tied up alongside. The French have gone to sea and said, look, you know, the Brits who've drubbed us over the centuries, you know, can't get ships to sea.
Are you advising Nigel Farage what to say on this?
No, I'm not. Actually,
I mean, don't you think that's a bit silly of him? He's got a former rear admiral, former NATO commander who knows about these things, and he's not asking your advice.
Peter, you have to ask me about that. I mean, the fact of life is I talk to other party members. I offer my advice. I'm on social media. If he wishes to take my advice, that's his prerogative. It's his privilege. If he wants not to, that's fine by me.
Okay, Chris, thank you. That's Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO commander. He's also the mayoral candidate for Reform UK for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Thanks for joining us this evening. Tony is in Doncaster, first caller of the evening, 0344 499 1000. Tony, you're very welcome to the programme. What point would you like to make this evening?
Hi, Peter. I'd just like to say that it's quite concerning and for the last few years, and the last few days it's brought into fruition what a disastrous, from a financial point of view, our military's in. And we've now been exposed more than ever. Because we insisted on taking sides with the Ukraine war, the Russia must be laughing at us now, because we've got I mean, our soldiers are very excellent quality, but the funding now is embarrassing as a country. And just to back this up, all I've heard all night before this show was our allegiance. We must back America. We must back Israel. We must back this. I think it shows more than ever that we are on our own in Europe, and it's quite frightening. We haven't got any friends, and I think our country now is as vulnerable as it's ever been.
So what should Keir Starmer do? Should he have sided with America? Should he stay where we are at the moment? What should he do? What would your advice to him be, Tony?
Well, my advice is it's a bit difficult because I'm of a right-wing persuasion. But what Keir Starmer should have done, he should have been a bit more like Margaret Thatcher and showed a bit of strength, because when she stuck to Ronald Reagan in respect to that, and he should have said in the first place, we're not supplying you any air bases on the basis of 3 factors. One, when you came back into power 2 years ago, you threatened NATO, you went from 2.5 to 5% target. And then you started psychologically saying, oh, there's a big ocean between us and Russia, so really we're not there with you. And if you don't back us, we'll put tariffs up. And here's the third point. Tell you what, the 457 soldiers that died in Afghanistan, they don't really matter, because the only soldiers that died were on the front line. And here's the final point, and I said this last week to one of your presenters. I was told I was wrong over the Falklands Islands that Israel didn't supply arms. I've fact-checked with 13 different websites tonight. Not only did they supply Stinger missiles, they supplied fighter jets. So
to Argentina.
We haven't got any allies, Peter.
To Argentina. Well, that was a long time ago, but things changed. But you're right to make that point. I didn't doubt that point. I think you made that point to me previously. I said I didn't know, but you've checked that, and thank you for doing so, Tony. And I didn't doubt you. I just didn't know. So thank you for doing so, Tony. And it's interesting how these things do change as time goes on. Appreciate your points tonight, Tony. You're welcome to give me a ring anytime if you want to respond to what Tony's saying. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Thank you to Stephen in Belfast, who says, when you look at Starmer and Trump, the only person Starmer thought could bridge that relationship was Mandelson. He was the best Starmer thought we had. What a shower. Trump spotted his weakness as soon as they met, and he has played Starmer like a fool. Even Macron sends warships. Trump even got Starmer to say we were on a war footing a few months ago. We're just going to go back to the House of Commons, see what's going on with that vote in the Courts and Tribunals bill.
Legislation. That is a bit embarrassing.
The ayes to the right were 304, the noes to the left 203. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlocked.
So the government has won by just over 100 votes there. It'll be very, very interesting to see what the number of rebels were. There was speculation of about 65 or so. The calculations will be done in the next minute or two, and I will bring that to you after the break. We're going to talk to our debate desk panellists. Rory Boyle and Phil Dave will be with us in just a few minutes' time, and we'll hopefully be able able to break down what the government's been doing. It has won that vote as expected, but it'll be very interesting to see just exactly how many Labour MPs rebelled. We'll hope to speak to one of them a little bit later on. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're just working out exactly what is happening with that vote in the House of Commons about jury trials. It was 304 to 203. The government have comfortably won, but the question is how many rebels were there, how many abstained. We also know in breaking news that HMS Dragon has now actually left and has departed for the Eastern Mediterranean. So we'll bring you the latest on that as time goes on. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch as well on Reform UK too, and Nigel Farage is flip-flopping on the war. Lorraine says, Peter, you're also always so quick to find any angle to criticise reform. Please listen to what Farage had to say, which was clear. We can't send armed forces and equipment that we don't have to fight a war. Our armed forces are so depleted they cannot offer anything. That has been made clear by the chaos this week. Farage was clear defence needs to be rebuilt, and that's what he will do. It would be a madman to put our forces out there defenceless. Lorraine, so what I do, we are not Reform FM, okay? I criticise every political party when they do U-turns. Nigel Farage has done a U-turn on this. It is very clear that a week ago, less than a week ago actually, he was saying we need to support America. Now he's saying there's nothing we can do. That is a change in tack. If Keir Starmer did that, if Kemi Badenoch did that, if Zach Polanski did that, we would talk about it. And I want to be really clear that if Reform UK are going to be the next government of this country, we need to hold their feet to the fire, make sure we do fair but critical and straightforward interviews, as I hope I always do with every political party, to make sure their policies stack up. And if they change their mind on something, I want to know why. They might have a perfectly reasonable reason for it. And Lorraine, you've pointed out very, very well, you've pointed out very ably quite a number of aspects of that. But if they flip-flop, if they U-turn, if they change their mind, we can't sit here and slag off Keir Starmer for his 15 U-turns. And then if Nigel Farage does a U-turn, we just sit there and go, oh, well, that's politics. But when the facts change, he changes his mind. We've got to hold them all to the same standard. And I know I used to have a background in the Conservative Party. I'm not a member of them anymore. And the party where it is now is not my personal politics anymore, but we've got to be fair to all of them. And I know there are a load of Reform UK supporters out there, I would say perhaps even the majority of our listenership and viewership, but my job is as a journalist is to make sure that we probe all of that. And we're going to probe it further now. Rory Boyle and Phil Dave are on the debate desk. Second night of the debate desk on my new show. You're both very, very welcome to the programme. Thank you both. Phil Dave, of course, talk presenter and political commentator, and Rory Boyle, political commentator. We've heard a lot about what Reform thinks on the war. Do you think he's being consistent? Am I being unfair here, Phil?
No, not at all. And as you say, we can't just sort of sit here and just champion people because our personal politics might align with it. I happen to think that if you want an honest opinion, Nigel Farage is wrong to say that we shouldn't support the efforts in Iran, but that would probably take far too long for me to sit here and list what those reasons are. But if someone is going to U-turn and suddenly change their mind when they've been very vocal about one way or another and then suddenly change their mind, of course we've got to criticise and we've got to say, well, hang on, why are you doing that? There's no wrong reason to say that.
Rory?
Yeah, I completely agree. Listen, I sit on the left on a lot of issues, not all issues, but a lot. But let's say, for instance, the Greens or Labour were to do something crazy, which does happens in every party. We absolutely...
Like, say, legalise all drugs, for example.
Well, we might get to that later, but we absolutely have the right as members of the public to criticise whatever party we want, especially when it comes to U-turns. So, yes, as you said, this is not Reform FM, thank God, or I would not be here. So I think that's absolutely fine.
What do you think about all of this? 0344 499 1000. Lorraine, I'm not sort of castigating you. I'm not necessarily even disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is we've got to be as critical, and I mean that in a positive sense, of all parties. Let's talk a little bit about the Green Party and whether Labour MPs are going to defect to the Green Party. It's clear to me, and I wonder what you guys think, that Keir Starmer is looking over his shoulder at the Green Party on many different decisions, including Iran. Maybe you disagree with that, and that's fine. And now we have speculation and some discussions as well about potential Labour MPs worried about their seats, thinking of moving to the Green Party. What do you think of this, Rory?
I understand it from their perspective. It's been a disastrous time for Labour pretty much since they got into power. I have traditionally been a Labour voter. Now I'm not quite sure where I would cast my vote if there were a general election tomorrow. I think when Labour came into power, they made so many gaffes to begin with. I mean, even the winter fuel allowance thing, so soon after they got into power, I just thought to myself, what are you doing? And after that, we've seen so many scandals, so much alleged infighting within the party that, you know, you can't really...
Not massively alleged.
Not massively alleged. I'm trying to be politically correct here. Yeah.
You don't have to be politically correct in this programme, let me tell you.
But yeah, I think that there has been so much turmoil, let's say, that I wouldn't blame anybody for wanting to jump ship. The only thing I would say is I don't think it's a great look for an MP when the road gets rocky to jump to another party, especially since, you know, the Greens haven't, let's be honest, the Greens haven't been this huge competitor or huge power in recent years. Now it looks like things may go their way. I happen to really like Hannah Spencer, who's obviously just...
Really?
Yes, he's obviously...
Why?
I like Hannah Spencer because, and I know this is not going to go down well, perhaps with either of you or the viewers or listeners, but
I love that everyone's entitled to their opinion.
There you go, Phil.
Well, we'll hear what Phil has to say in a second.
But I really would like to see more members of Parliament who are going to actively stand for the LGBT and specifically trans community. Keir Starmer, if anyone remembers, a while back stood in Parliament with the murdered transgender teenager Brianna Jai's mother and promised to essentially do right by the trans community. And I don't think he's done that at all. I think in that moment he was pandering to the left but actually had no intentions of really uplifting the trans community in any meaningful way through policy, reform, etc. So I think Hannah Spencer will actually do that. She was just faced a lot of violence and vitriol in Manchester over those very issues.
She's also propped up by a lot of Islamists.
Well...
I mean, who really, really don't care about transgender people. In fact, quite the opposite.
Who really don't care about Britain, full stop.
I would argue there's a lot of people who don't care about trans people in this country, but Hannah Spencer is not one of them.
But but many of the people who support her are people who don't care about trans people, don't care about gay people, and interestingly, and don't care about women's rights either. And interestingly, we've got a red-green alliance there when it comes to the Green Party, and that really concerns me. Does it not concern you, Roy?
Well, you know, here's the thing. You say that these people don't care about gay people or trans people, but I know gay and trans Muslims. So it's a very sweeping statement to just say...
Well, I do too, but if you have
someone... But it doesn't mean they care about them. In fact, actually, on the contrary, they actually might be sort of kicked out of their community for all intents and purposes, because actually they just don't align with the way a lot of people think.
I suppose a better way to put it, perhaps, is some of the things that some of the Green supporters on the Islam, I'm not talking about ordinary Muslims, I'm not talking about gay Muslims, I'm talking about Islamist Muslims who have supported the Green Party. That really, really concerns me, because I don't want Islamists near any part of our ruling elite at all.
Okay, well, I don't want extremists near any part of our ruling elite.
But they are. That's why the Green Party won.
But, you know, here's the thing. I think that these communities can stand side by side. You know, I don't have any problem with Islam or Muslim people who may not enjoy the fact that I'm gay, but I think we can live side by side without resorting to violence or hatred. I see a lot more of that coming from Nigel Farage.
Can I ask you, how do you feel then
go on.
about Islamists who openly say that they believe that people of the LGBT community should die because they're infidels, they don't belong in this world?
I think that's absolutely awful. I think it's a terrible thing to say.
Okay, but then that's the problem that I think what Peter's getting at is that a lot of the supporters, I'm not saying all of them by any stretch, a lot of the supporters that have been aligned with Green Party policy, certainly what we've seen over in Gorton Denton, unfortunately they come from that ilk. That's the kind of thing that they believe in, and I have a real problem with that. I think that anyone who wants to see anyone else dead purely for what their sexuality is, their religion, the colour of the skin, anything like that, is a major problem in society, and I don't want them anywhere near politics.
And I think that the Muslim community, some of the Muslim community, have massive bridges to build in regard to that. I agree with you there. There are Muslims out there who do want gay people dead, etc. But I think if we are going to build those bridges, it's not someone like Nigel Farage who's going to help build them. Yeah, we have lots of Muslim people. The problem is you can't build bridges with people who want to see you dead. That's not actually physically possible. That's not possible, because you're never going to persuade these individuals. And I want to make this very clear for anyone who writes in and complains. We are talking about fundamentalists here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about absolute extreme members of society who happen to try and carry out things in inverted commas in the name of Islam.
But not even just that. I'm not being anti-Islamic here, but I am looking at some polling data that makes it very clear that there might be people who don't necessarily go out, take part in Islamist extremism, but there are about 50%, I think it's 46% of Muslims in this country say they don't agree with people being gay, for example. So there will be, by the very nature of things, a lot of people who voted Green who don't agree with a lot of what Hannah Spencer says, and they may not know quite what they're voting for. Does that not sit badly with you?
It sits badly with me that they might not like people being gay. I do think there's a difference between not liking and wanting dead, as Phil has pointed out. But I'm simply making the point that I want to see the LGBT community uplifted. Hannah Spencer is going to do that. I don't think there's any other, there's not many other examples of other key players, politicians who can really drive change, who are doing the same thing.
David Cameron drove change. David Cameron brought in equal marriage for same-sex people.
He did, but you know, David Cameron's not in power anymore, so let's move the conversation on from him.
Okay.
But let's not deny that, of course, it was a bit of a bribe from the Lib Dems, and it was one of the one of the agreements for being in coalition with them.
We'll go back to that in a minute or two. I just want to say that there appear to only be, I'm on Nerd app, which is the voting app, which tells you how everybody has been voting, and apparently there are only 10 Labour rebels on the jury trials vote. Some of the sort of people you would expect, like Bell Ribeiro, Addy, John McDonnell, Ian Lavery. I mean, no massive surprises there. Interestingly, Carl Turner's name is not on that, so I think he must have abstained in this. Very, very interesting in all of that. So only actually 10 Labour no's. It'll be interesting to see how many abstentions there are. I haven't got that figure yet, and this doesn't give you the detail about that. There have been 8 independents against them, people like Diane Abbott, obviously used to be in the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn from your party, Rosie Duffield, and various others as well, so including some of the pro-Gaza MPs like Iqbal Mohammed and Adnan Hussein. We are going to talk about this a little bit later on in the programme as well. 6 Reform UK MPs voting against that too. So very, very interesting on that part, but it has gone through. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with Carl Turner and what his views on that are. I just want to read out a couple of messages before we go back to a break and then back to the debate desk. And please do give me a ring on anything that Rory and Phil and I have been saying. 0344 499 1000. On Nigel Farage, he said, when Nigel Farage said we should support America, he did not mean, and has he not said on a couple of occasions that we should have supported America, should have been to let them use our bases. He does not say we should get involved. I mean, he basically did say we should get involved. I'm sorry, that's not quite right. Paul in Crewe says, completely agree that you should challenge what Farage at all say. However, last week he spoke about supporting the US by allowing them to use RAF bases, including Diego Garcia, not dither and delay like Starmer did, so he can check the law book. So politically, Farage is saying we should have supported the USA in his speech. This week, Farage is purely talking from an equipment and capability point of view. The US can use the bases, but it is clear we are not able to join the fight purely due to us being incapable. The Navy is only fit to be in the dock. Army numbers decimated, and the RAF only good for defence at best. Farage was spot on last week and this week, says Paul in Crewe. And another person says, you're being unfair. He didn't, and giving steam to the others on your show is not helpful. Rob in London says, please stop attacking reform. Nigel made it clear today his stance on Iran is not flip-flopping. Every opportunity to criticise Nigel. Sick of it. I'm not someone who goes out of my way to criticise Nigel Farage, but he has changed his stance on this. I'm sorry, he has. Another person says, yes, criticise, but don't spin what Farage says it wasn't a flip or a flop. Well, there we are. Nicola in Norfolk says, sorry, but I do not see Farage U-turning. Last week he said he would have given the US access to our bases and supported them. I do not think anything he has said since then contradicts that, says Nicola. And a final one before the break says, Peter, I'm Indian. I was born here in the UK in Bradford in 1972. We are leaving the UK because of this horrible, idiotic government. The white indigenous population is being played. England is no longer England or English. Very sad to see this, says Suresh. Lots to discuss, including on the debate desk next. Stay with us for more from Rory and Phil. Agree? Disagree? Tell us we're talking nonsense, or tell us that every word that comes out of our mouth is pure gold and as true and as pure as the driven snow. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch. We'll go back to your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes very, very soon. But we are back on the debate desk with Rory Boyle and Phil Dave. I want to talk now about the migrant hotel linked by police to a shocking number of crimes, including sexual offences. Phil Dave has some of the details on this. Phil, just tell us what's been happening here.
Yeah, so this is the Britannia Hotel in Seacroft in Leeds. Apparently it's been linked to a record 202 crimes over 5 years. So this is according to police data obtained through a Freedom of Information request. The hotel apparently currently houses around 210 asylum seekers, and it was one of the first hotels used by the Home Office for migrant accommodation. Now, I could go into the actual breakdown of what those offences look like. I'm sure we'll do that in a moment. But the point being is that to anyone who rubbished, saying that those of us who are saying that we were very concerned about the security threat posed by housing illegal migrants who we don't know where they come from and what they're going to get up to, how they're going to treat other members in society, all of those who rubbish that, I'm sorry, this is categorically proving that there is some truth in that there is a potential security threat.
It's interesting what some of the residents are doing here as well, because residents living near the hotel making a Freedom of Information request. Honestly, these things, we do them sometimes here journalistically as well, and they're very, very useful to get some information. They put this into West Yorkshire Police as to how many crimes have been committed from January 2021 until last December, so in a 5-year period. 202 offences, as Phil said, sex attacks, arson, drug offences, violence. During this period, 11 sexual offences reported, 25 of arson and criminal damage, 79 offences of violence against the person, 44 public order offences and 12 theft offences. Rory, the point is that we do not know who's coming into this country. We put them in hotels. The processing is a massive problem, and I get that. But we also need to know, people need to feel safe in their communities. And if you live in Seacroft, you're not going to feel safe.
Yeah, I understand that completely, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I know obviously you just read out some allegations there, and there was another...
well, that's from the police. Those are police figures. They're not
police figures, I should say. And another figure I read was that within a year of that hotel becoming a migrant hotel, there were 6 sexual assaults reported. I mean, that is a really hard stat to stomach. I would really like to know how that happened and how it was handled. And, you know, a lot of this stuff is really scary. I agree with you guys. Listen, I'm on the left, but I'll be honest and say, if I live literally a 2-minute walk from a hotel. If that hotel turned into a migrant hotel and this sort of stuff was happening, I would be scared. Speaking about the Greens a minute ago and the fact that there are some people in the party I do like, I know that they have said they would like to see, quote unquote, a world without borders. Now, I don't think that's realistic. And I also think as well, thinking about sort of the average ordinary person in the UK and how they may vote at the next general election, that is not a policy that is going to win many people over. There's, you know, people on the left like me who think this is too extreme. So I do understand all of the upset over this, and I get it. I get what you're saying. I think for me, I do have some sympathy for people who were in those hotels who aren't violent, who came here for legitimate reasons to escape terrible situations where they're from.
But they committed a crime by doing so, and they're not escaping persecution in France.
I agree that they're not escaping persecution in France.
They don't have to come here.
Yeah, and look, I think the three of us probably all know why they do and the loopholes as to why it's so easy, but I'm simply making the point that, you know, there's a lot of gang involvement with some of these people. Gangs do entice them to come here for various reasons, and when they get to these hotels, I've read lots of reports from charity workers who've worked with some of the migrants who are in these hotels, and they are a scary place to be. If you're not a migrant with nefarious motives, as I appreciate some of those who you just read out were, but if you're someone who isn't, when you get to that hotel and you're faced with the reality of breakouts of things like scabies, obviously violence, sexual crimes, arson, etc., that is a very harrowing situation for you to be in. So something needs to change. I think all of the political parties have spoken out against various aspects of migrants coming here, but really it's the Tories who, you know, want a plan in place, I believe, to make it much more difficult for migrants to get on the universal credit system.
Well, it's more than that. Their policy, as well as Reform UK's policy, is if you land on a beach here and you are here illegally, you would immediately be sent back. You'd be processed and immediately sent back, and you would never get asylum in this country. So it's a lot harsher even than that.
Yeah, I do think harsh policies like that are going to win over voters. I don't think it's the sort of flimsy, we are the world, let's welcome everyone in stance that the Green Party have gone for.
Do you remember that ludicrous song, We Are the World? What was that? Was that a UN thing, or Michael Jackson was
It was
involved?
Michael Jackson behind it, yeah.
Well, I mean,
we are not. I mean, you'd be forgiven for looking at London and thinking we are the world, but no, we are not the world. Look, it's terribly simple. It boils down to that we need to realise there is nothing wrong with saying, and I don't think anyone in this studio this evening is saying this, but we need to be able to say there is nothing wrong with criticising successive governments' abhorrent and ridiculous and stupid policies when it comes to dealing with this problem of illegal migration. But there is also nothing wrong with saying that we don't want people here who are here illegally to be here, because there's nothing wrong with it. If we are genuinely worried as British tax-paying, hard-working citizens for our safety, our children's safety, our family's safety and security, there is nothing wrong with saying we don't want these kind of people here.
And Marty Blackborough, who founded the Stand Up Leeds group, made the Freedom of Information request, said people in Seacroft are deeply concerned after official data from West Yorkshire Police showed dozens of recorded crimes at the Britannia Hotel. These include violence, sexual offences, public disorder, theft and criminal damage, all recorded at one location in our community. This isn't about scaremongering, it's about safety. We all deserve to feel safe where we live. Our community deserves transparency and protection. This hotel should have shut down after the first year when there were 6 sexual assaults. How many crimes have gone unreported? We want the hotel closed and all illegals deported.
You know what they're going to say, though, don't you? They're going to say, well, if there's only 202 crimes reported in 5 years, and you've got thousands of people who've come over in those 5 years, people are just going to say, oh, well, this is only a small number, it doesn't matter. There shouldn't be one crime.
Well, but it's proportionally quite a high number, Rory.
I do understand and respect the sentiments expressed in that quote that you just read. The only other thing I would say is, though, another problem that's been created by all of this is I've seen some really awful videos on social media of very recent times in Birmingham where there have been some, I would call them far-right extremists who have essentially been attacking black teenagers and people of colour in the streets who there's no evidence these people are migrants, and they're hurling verbal abuse at them. And we know that hate crime is on the rise for multiple communities across the UK, but I do think that this situation does rile more people up by some of the misinformation and lies that is out there, and it does.
But actually, this is, I mean, I don't disagree with a single word you've said there,
yeah.
And nobody should be attacking anybody for their race, or their religion or sexuality.
Nobody should be attacking anyone, period.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yes. But these are facts. You know, these are facts that have been got from the West Yorkshire Police, and the fact is that a lot of people may worry and say there's disinformation out there, and there is. Nothing you've said is wrong there. But the point is there's a real reason for concern here, and Marty Blackburn will say reasonable things. People may act unreasonably as a result. But it should. I'm not defending it at all. I'm not saying it should happen. I'm not equivocating. What I'm saying is we've got to understand why people feel like that in our society as well.
You know what's really curious?
Let's hear from Rory first, then we'll come to you, Phil.
Well, I was just going to ask you both, do either of you think, though, at the moment, there is a mainstream party that really is going to, quote-unquote, smash the gangs, really is going to get a firm handle on this situation
Smash
and
the
change
gangs,
it?
no, but make tougher threats, yes.
Okay.
So I think if you start using tougher language, bring in the Navy and, you know, make proper threats that could be carried out, then I think people start taking it a bit more seriously.
There has to be a deterrent. There's no deterrent at the moment.
Oh, no deterrent. No deterrent at all.
The point I was going to make, though, is that you were saying about earlier on in the discussion, you were talking about, when we were talking about Green Party defections, you were saying about how you want to see the LGBT community elevated, I think was your wording that you used, and that you believe that the new Gorton and Denton MP would do that. You see, here is my problem. I actually believe the reason why this hatred has arisen so much is because successive governments and politicians for so many years now have been highlighting time and time again what divides all of us, what separates us, and highlighting those differences, meaning that people feel as though that there are people in this country who don't belong here, whether or not actually if we would sort of look and sort of say what unites all of us, then that would make a much more coherent society. But unfortunately, that doesn't suit the politicians because it's that age-old adage of divide and conquer.
Phil Dave in the studio, or is it Gandhi? Anthony's been in touch.
Hairdresser.
Anthony's been in touch and says, talking about a baptism of fire, last night you got viewers saying you were wrong to think who is English and who isn't. Tonight I see you've upset Nigel Farage's supporters. Yes, it's only taken a week and a bit. We're actually going to talk a bit more about Nigel Farage. We'll take a call with these guys, with Rory and Phil, in just a second. I'll see if we can get Simon and Gravesend on the line if we can, and we'll take him after the break on Nigel Farage. We'll also talk about digital ID. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. Just having a look at some of my tweets there over the break. Lots of people getting in touch. And Alan says, just listen to Peter and the people on the debate desk. Rory to say, Peter, I'm disappointed in your comments as an understatement. As for the personal, not reading exactly what word Alan has said with you, no thanks. I don't listen to Farage bashing. Well, we're not bashing Nigel Farage. We're being critical. We're talking about what he has said and whether he has changed his mind on Iran, which I think he has. Another person says, you made a right mess of trying to make out Farage as you turned over supporting the USA over Iran. What a bell, full stop. I think there's maybe an end to that as well. Simon in Gravesend has been in touch. Just give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Simon, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you. Good evening, Peter.
Hi there. You're on. I should say you're on with Rory and Phil as well on the debate desk.
Yeah. Oh, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I'd like to pull you up a bit on this Nigel Farage doing a flip-flop.
Okay.
What happened was, as you played him, what was it, on the 5th of...
last Thursday, 5th of March, yeah.
Yeah, where he was going on about he would support Donald Trump and with allowing him the use of the air bases straight away. He was at a press conference this morning with Robert Jenrick, and the question was put to him, would you, if you were in government, support Donald Trump with military action?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer was, with what? We don't have...
So you think he's been completely consistent here?
Oh yeah, totally, 100%.
Okay.
It wasn't that he didn't want to say, he wasn't not supporting Donald Trump. It was a case of, we've got nothing to support Donald Trump with.
Simon, stay where we are just a second. We're going to play those clips again. I'm going to ask Rory and Phil what they think about your points, and then I promise you'll come back to you. Is that okay? Just to sit tight for a minute or two.
Yeah, of course it is.
Okay, let's play let's take Simon down just for a second. We'll play the first clip, which is from the 5th of March. This is last Thursday, what Farage said at a Reform press conference in Wales. Let's hear what he said there.
And now we find ourselves humiliated. What was for centuries the greatest naval nation on earth is now unable for up to a fortnight to send a Type 45 to Cyprus to defend, and remember this, British sovereign territory.
Okay, that was 5 days ago, 5th of March. Let's see what Nigel Farage said today, and then you can decide whether he's U-turned, whether I'm wrong, whether Simon's right, whatever you think. You can let us know. Let's hear what Nigel Farage said today.
Well, I tell you what, given that we can't even send a Royal Naval vessel to defend British sovereign territory at an RAF base, we certainly don't have the capability to offer anything of any value to the Americans or the Israelis. So defending the base, recognising the catastrophe that is now the Royal Navy, and by the way, President Macron is really, frankly, showing the humiliating state that we've sunk to today with his very decisive actions and his intention to help clear the Straits of Hormuz. And the other point is protecting British citizens. I think so far the government have hired one charter plane, and even that broke down and was 24 hours late. So yes, we should never, ever, ever have said no to the Americans using the bases, particularly Diego Garcia. And interestingly, Mauritius have been very, very clear they would not have allowed that base to be used at all.
So he'd previously said, Nigel Farage, that Britain should do all we can to support US-Israeli action in the Middle East. Richard Tice also voicing support for bombing Iran. He also said Keir Starmer was dithering in his response and said the gloves need to come off in regard to Iran. Am I getting this wrong, Phil?
No, well, I understand sort of why people see it from both sides. I understand that sort of the messaging from Farage is sort of consistent but slightly twisted to sound as if he's backtracking a little bit. So it's more about the tone he's using in the second clip we heard there.
Okay.
Sounds a little bit more like he's saying, well, we can't do it, so why should we bother? But I would suggest that it's not inconsistent. It's not like he said, in the first clip, we absolutely should get involved. We should do all we
said
can.
that the gloves need to come off. Rory, U-turn or no U-turn?
I think I agree with Phil. He sounds frustrated, but I don't know if it's a full U-turn. And listen, I know this is not the Joan Rivers show Fashion Police, but can we talk about Nigel's outfit in that second
No, we
clip
can't.
for a second?
No, sorry, we can't. Because we only have 4 minutes to go back to Simon in Gravesend. Simon, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, as I say, he has been consistent. He supports Donald Trump and what they're doing to Iran. But his point was that we can't assist him because we've got nothing to assist him with. The military force in this country has been run down so much over the last few years, with the Conservatives and Labour making it worse.
Okay, Simon, listen, thanks for your call. Really appreciate that. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's not a U-turn. Maybe it's a nuanced position that I fail to fully appreciate. Maybe I've done a U-turn on the U-turn. You never know. I want to talk a little bit just before, not about Nigel Farage's fashion, but you can certainly talk about that on another occasion, perhaps. Let's talk about Labour scrambling to save digital ID plans with a People's Panel. What is this, Phil?
Oh, God help us. Sorry, did I just say that out loud? Well, anyway, as you rightly identify, it's ministers apparently are going to create a People's Panel of around 100 randomly selected citizens to discuss the policy and help its development.
Why can't they just make their mind up? Why can't they just say, we're doing this, come with me?
Well, we can say that very clearly, can't we? It's because if they hand it over to the people, and they are very selective about the people they choose, I have no doubt about this. If they hand it over to the people and the people turn around and say, this is how we would implement it, well, those people want to implement it. The UK public wants it.
Rory, how do you feel about ID cards?
I'm very on the fence about them, simply because I actually don't think we have a lot of information about what the actual end goal is, what it will actually entail, how much data...
We've been lied to. I mean, originally they said it'll only be for one specific purpose, which is getting a job. Then they're saying babies are going to have them. Then they're going to say we're going to have them from birth. They're going to be for all sorts of reasons. There's no consistency in all of this, and I wonder whether it's cock-up or conspiracy. Labour just don't know where they are in this policy.
Well, there was also a lot of talk at one time about how a benefit of these digital IDs was apparently going to be that it was going to make it easier for, or harder, let's say, for those who wanted to exploit migrants. So let's say employers, like there were a number of fast fashion employers who allegedly were exploiting migrants, and the government told us this was going to mitigate some of that. I think there was also at one point a lot of talk about how it was going to be a lot more difficult to create a fake digital ID, where we know across many countries across the world creating fake passports is actually very easy.
It happens all the time.
You know, I don't necessarily believe that, and I think creating a fake digital file to me seems like it would also be something that could be very easily perfected. So frankly, we need more information, and we also definitely need more info on who those 100 people are.
I just think farming out policy to 100 people is not a good idea.
Well, I was going to say that's what it is, but not to mention, I just don't see it's necessary. We're already sort of one of the most observed countries anyway, so what does it matter?
Listen, thank you both very much. That's Phil Dave, talk presenter, and Rory Boyle, political commentator. Thank you both for joining me on the debate desk, the second one on these evening programmes. What do you think about what they've said? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk about fears over free speech as Labour has given a definition to Islamophobia. The former government advisor on political violence, Lord Wolney, will join me. And thanks to Alex, who says this isn't final in jury trials, is it? The bill will have to go to the Lords before anything final. You're absolutely right, but this is the most important bit, the second reading. So of course it can be amended. There are various bits that will happen in the Lords and the Commons as well, and committee stages and all the rest of it, but this is the most significant bit. So very, very interesting that only 10 actual Labour rebels on that, and Carl Turner's name wasn't in there. Lots more to discuss in the next hour of the programme. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 8 o'clock, lots to report and lots to discuss between now and 10 o'clock, including Nigel Farage's thoughts on the war with Iran. We'll also talk about a free speech row, fears over free speech as Labour has given a definition to Islamophobia and announces its first anti-Muslim hostility czar. Lots in that as well. We'll talk about bleed kits, bleed kit rollout for Transport for London on the bus network. This is because of the number of stabbings, because you need to stop the bleeding, and this will be available on buses. We'll talk about migrants using the UK as a cash machine, as is revealed 1 in 4 non-EU settlers is on universal credit. And the Iranian women's football team, we talked a little bit about 5 of them defecting yesterday. Where are you, Gary Lineker? Where are you, Ian Wright? Where are all these woke celebrity footballers? Where are the lionesses? Where are they coming out saying this is a good thing because they're fleeing oppression? And of course, the first thing they do, take off their headscarves because they're in Australia and they have done well to flee the regime at great personal cost to them and probably their families back in Iran too. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why lots of people think I'm wrong on Nigel Farage, and that's okay, because on my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable, and that's exactly what has happened so far this evening. So much to discuss. If you want to get in touch, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note on the main number. Keep it to less than a minute, please, if you would. You can also send me, pick up the phone and make a phone call on 0344 499 1000. We'll speak to Darrell and Lincoln in just a second. So much to discuss between now and 10. Do stay with me here on Talk. Well, Farage has changed his tune on Iran. Is it a U-turn? Is it a flip-flop? Or is it just a development of his position? Lots of people disagree with me, including Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, Peter, I'm afraid I disagree with you. I don't see where the U-turn is, despite watching the clips more than once. We've got a voice note as well from Tony on what Farage says.
Evening, Peter. No, I agree. When you talk about Farage flip-flopping, it's not flip-flopping. You can't say, oh, at the beginning, oh, yeah, I'm with him, and then be accused of flip-flopping because he said he ain't. When suddenly you realise that what you knew at the beginning was, yeah, we're on the side to take out those that have terror against us. But when you realise you haven't got the army that you need to even protect your own borders, probably, let alone going anywhere else like Ukraine or butting in and going to Iran, he's being real. There's a difference with flip-flopping and being real. So get real.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Tony. I mean, I would point out that Nigel Farage said, where is the exact quote? Let me just find it here. He said, well, the gloves need to come off with regard to Iran, and he criticised Keir Starmer for his dithering response to the conflict. I think his mood has changed a little bit on this. Lots of people disagree with me. That's okay. Robert says you're being unfair to Nigel and not all the military information. He's not in any Cobra meetings now. With a few days more information, he might want to help, but now he knows we are screwed and can't do anything. Barry says at no stage did Nigel Farage say he would support offensive action. The country is no longer capable anyway. And on this jury trials aspect as well, we know the government has won that. 10 Labour rebels. Mark in Norfolk says, can you imagine the response if Reform UK was in power and cut jury trials, tried to cancel elections, forced digital ID on us and introduced a blasphemy law? Can you hear the shouts of fascism? Welcome to Labour socialism. Well, there isn't a blasphemy law, but the rest of those things, of course, has happened. On an ID card, L says, well, I will not be signing up for an ID card, so there. And Lord Walney is with us now. We're going to talk a little bit about blasphemy. We're going to talk a little bit about Islamophobia and the government announcing its first anti-Muslim hostility czar. This was the creation of an official definition of anti-Muslim hostility, the country's first czar to tackle it in a £4 million drive. John, thank you for joining us, Lord Walney, John Woodcock. Do you think we need this?
No, I'm not convinced that we do. We certainly need to be able to do more to tackle the level of hostility and prejudice that Muslims do experience in the country. There's been a real spike in that in recent years. It's a very serious issue, but the this new definition is landing at a time when there are genuine concerns and real evidence that there has already been for some years now a suppression of the people's willingness to talk about difficult issues of Islamist extremism for fear of being branded a racist or an Islamophobe or prejudiced, and that's without a definition. There's a real danger that the introduction of this definition will actually make the situation worse at the very moment when we need to be clearer about calling out the levels of extremism that Islamists, not Muslims, but Islamists, try to propagate in this country.
I just want to read out this definition. It's in 3 paragraphs, and the Community Secretary, Steve Reid, says that it will in no way restrict people's freedom to criticise Islam. And I'll get your view on that in a second about whether you agree with him, John. But the definition is a little bit long, but I'm just going to read it out. Anti-Muslim hostility is intentionally engaging in, assisting or encouraging criminal acts, including acts of violence, vandalism, harassment or intimidation, whether physical, verbal, written or electronically communicated, that are directed at Muslims because of their religion or at those who are perceived to be Muslim, including where that perception is based on assumptions about ethnicity, race or appearance. It is also the prejudicial stereotyping of Muslims or people perceived to be Muslim, including because of their ethnic or racial backgrounds or their appearance, and treating them as a collective group defined by fixed and negative characteristics with the intention of encouraging hatred against them, irrespective of their actual opinions, beliefs or actions as individuals. It is engaging in unlawful discrimination, whether relevant conduct, including a creation or use of practices and biases within institutions, is intended to disadvantage Muslims in public and economic life. I'm quite concerned about that because I think that some of it makes sense, but really, if you generalize about Muslims, if you talk about the Muslim vote, for example, if you talk about something to do with family voting, for example, being more prevalent in Islamic communities, which is a fact, that, by this definition, in my view, could be seen as Islamophobic.
Sure, and that's what's going to be tested out now, and it is vital that the government monitors this really closely and is prepared to, if there is that kind of controversy and suppression of the freedom of speech, that it's prepared to hold up its hand and say it's got this wrong. Now, I think Steve Reid, I know, has come into this role because he became the community secretary when there was already commitment to do this. There was already a process that had been in place. In fact, the origins of this came in the Jeremy Corbyn years when the Labour Party signed up to a much more egregious definition of Islamophobia. So the actual text, which has been finally released now, is better in several ways, certainly from the original Islamophobia definition. But there is clear danger that this could be used ironically, or very deliberately by Islamists themselves to be able to drive a wedge within between communities and to try to stop any discussion of the malign ways in which they themselves operate.
So how do we combat this? And is the government just going to go ahead with this? Is this just going to become law? And I mean, you must be quite worried about the implications for freedom of speech. On this programme, on this station, for example, there are various things that are said from time to time that I think there would be people who would say that they are Islamophobic. I don't believe they are, for example. I think they're just having a legitimate criticism. Some of the conversations we've had, John, for example, legitimate criticism of Islamism, for example. Sure. It does worry me here, and I do wonder whether each community is being treated equally here.
Well, that's exactly so. I mean, you if you stand up pretty much anywhere and mock the Church of England, for example. I think probably many Anglican vicars expect that, and some probably encourage it, and it is in no way seen as a level of prejudice. It's seen as part of being British, but there has been a very different attitude which has been taken to Islam, and that has been borne out in deeply alarming instances, such as the teacher in Batley in Spain, who was forced to go into hiding in fear for his life, and it still actually has not emerged from that. And there are people who say that it is illegitimate to criticize Islam, and that there should be severe penalties for anyone who does that. And,
or as we have seen in recent weeks, people saying that someone criticizing Islam, for example, why are you doing it here? This is a Muslim area. Well, there aren't Muslim areas, there aren't Christian areas, there aren't Jewish areas. The areas belong to the whole of the community. And we can't say that people can't do certain things in certain areas. John, I wonder if I could just ask you just about the problems that your old party are having at the moment with the Courts and Tribunals Bill as well. We've had that vote in Parliament tonight. Only 10 Labour rebels that I can see, many others abstaining. I don't know the full totals there. But on jury trials, how much trouble do you think Keir Starmer is in on this?
Well, I think probably given the scale of the discontent within the Labour Party, they'd probably take 10 rebels and a bunch of abstentions, and I think that this has been an interesting one, the way that it has played out. It's probably not at the core of issues that can really wind up Labour people to rebel, and I think probably they are. The ministers who want to do this are somewhat held by the fact that this has become a rallying call for the Conservatives, because it's always easier when you're managing your tribe, you will remember this well, to be able to say, oh look, it's just those bad guys on the other side that are trying to make something of this, and don't give them a win. Now, I think the position of Labour MPs remains really difficult. I feel sorry for many of my colleagues. They know that they're in real trouble electorally, and I think probably this government sort of limps onto the May elections, and then I think the prospect of having that snapshot and showing just how discontent the country is going to be very difficult for them and for the party. And I know that really active conversations are going on about what is the way in which the party could right itself. Is there a way out? How do you deal with the twin threat now of voters, their traditional voters peeling off to reform, and also much of the so-called progressive vote being hoovered up by the Greens. So it is a very difficult position that they are in.
John, thank you. That is Lord Walney. John Woodcock, thank you for joining us on the programme this evening. Dee in Chesterfield has been in touch and says, Peter, we have to come around to the idea that MPs are our employees. They're not our masters. If you're an office manager and your staff are doing their nails and playing computer games, you would have every right to get them back to work. The priorities for most people are the cost of living, especially fuel and utilities, law and order and personal safety. Those are not the priorities of the woeful Labour government. They spend their time empowering terrorists and men who harm women. By their fruits shall ye know them, says D in Chesterfield. Darryl is in Lincoln and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. The armed forces are on your mind this evening, Darryl. What do you think?
Yeah, I was listening to Robert Jenrick when he was talking to Kev O'Sullivan earlier, and Kev specifically asked him whether reform, if they were in power, would they commit to rebuilding the armed forces. And I was a little bit disappointed with his response, actually, because he kind of skirted around the subject a little bit for me, and he didn't really give a direct answer to that.
But what would you have liked him to say? What do you think he should say, Darryl?
What I think he should be saying, and I think what the British people want reform to say, is that we're going to stop spending billions on illegal immigrants. We're going to stop giving millions and millions of pounds away to foreign countries unnecessarily, such as this money to Pakistan for family planning and stuff. We're going to stop, or we're going to cut right back on universal credit payouts, especially to migrants. You know, when 1 in 4 migrants are claiming universal credit, I mean, that's crazy. And you know, we're going to sort out all these issues, and with all of this money that we're going to stop wasting, you know, giving money away to France and all sorts of crazy stuff that we're doing with money, that a lot of that money could go into the armed forces, rebuilding the armed forces and creating lots more jobs, you know, and you know, I mean, we've only got 76,000 you know, personnel in the armed forces, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's too small, isn't it?
Yeah, way too small. And I mean, there's loads of jobs that could be created there for, you know, especially for a lot of the unemployed youth who could get into the armed forces. And so,
do you know what we've got to do, Darryl? First of all, I think everything you're saying is absolute common sense, Darryl. There's just so much of it coming out of your mouth this evening, and thank you for your common sense. The point I would just add to it, and I would say we've got to restore pride in our armed forces on both sides. The people who are donning the uniform, the people who are serving this country, people who have served it previously, who are now retired veterans or veterans' families, but also for people to go into it, to see it as a great career. And that happens in so many different ways. Why is it that the prison service, who can't get enough prison officers, aren't going directly to, and the police as well, going directly to the army and say, hold on a second, you've got people coming out after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you've got loads of great skills we could use in the prisons, we could use in the police force, and they're not doing that.
Well, I used to be in the police myself, and, you know, virtually 50%, or probably even more, of all police officers were ex-armed forces. Yeah. You know, it was, you know, virtually everybody you worked with had been in one of the forces or the other, you know, and that's you know, how it should be, really. But I do think that reform, you know, that they're not very concrete sometimes on some of their sort of
I mean, to defend reform, and I've been critical of them a little bit tonight, Darryl, I mean, we're 3 years away from an election. We don't need to know every single thing they would do right now, do we, Darryl?
No, but I mean, I hear what you were saying about Nigel Farage, and I think he was probably, you know, what he was probably trying to stress was that we just haven't got the armed force capability to offer proper support. But I mean, you know, I think that's probably what he was getting at. And I mean, for sure, we should have kept America on side right from the offset, really, you know, on that. But you know, I do think the British people, that's why a lot of people are straying over to restore, you know, because reform aren't always just that. To me, they seem to be sort of like wavering a little bit, trying to maybe please people.
Although they've got to broaden their appeal if they want to be the government, the next government of this country. They can't just be put in a box. Really interesting talking to you, Darryl. Give me a ring anytime, Darryl. Really interesting to talk to you. A lot of common sense in that. Don't agree with every single thing Darryl said, but that doesn't matter because on my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable. Leslie says, what implications will there be on the press and media with this Islamophobia law, and is this a blasphemy law? I don't think it's a blasphemy law per se, Leslie, but I am quite worried about this definition. I'm worried about people throwing allegations around about legitimate criticism of Islam and Islamism, and I think that we need to be able to criticise all sorts of religions, and by putting people into so many different boxes because of their religion, that to me doesn't help in the general sense. We're going to talk in a second about another very concerning story. These are calls for bleed kits to be installed in every major bus station and on bus routes in areas affected by serious violence. This has been backed by the London Assembly, unanimously passing a motion requesting the Transport for London work with the London Ambulance Service to ensure the kits will be made available across the network. They stem severe bleeding from deep wounds before emergency services arrive. It just shows how bad things are in our capital city. Peter Blexley is the man I want to hear with his views on all of this. He's coming up next, so stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including the people who are criticising me, and that's fine. Alan says, thank you for reading my rant out on the air, Peter. You tactfully missed out the naughty bits. You're back in my good books now, which is fine. Yeah, it becomes a bit of a skill, especially when you're reading unfiltered messages on Twitter, that you change things a little bit when people say words that we can't, for Ofcom reasons, really repeat, even if it is past 9 o'clock in the evening. Andy says, digital ID is coming, not just to access the internet, but to access your own computer at operating system level, Windows, Mac OS and Linux. Already passed in California and others. In Brazil, massive fines for not building in age checks as well. Goose, who doesn't appear to like me very much, says, are you abstaining from rocking out to your favourite movie soundtrack, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? He's mentioned this a few times. I said on air that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it's actually, the film is actually called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but it wouldn't be like me to be pedantic. Cardwell attempting a gotcha on Farage tonight. What an absolute woke idiot this man is. He has talked very own Keith Starmer. Wow, I've been called a lot worse, believe me, but thank you for that nonetheless. And thank you to Elisa, who says on this particular story we're going to talk about a little bit later on Iran and these 5 female players for the football team, women's football team, who have defected in Australia. My question is, where are you, Gary Lineker? Where are you, Lionesses? Where are you, Ian Wright? Where are all these woke celebrities who took the knee and said, yes, we care about women's rights and human rights? Here are people who have escaped the Iranian regime. You're saying absolutely nothing about them. Elisa says, to be honest, I'd rather footballers and celebrities not comment on anything political whatsoever. The trouble is, some of them do, and more often than not, they talk utter nonsense, I would use a stronger word, with a few exceptions. It would cause a lot less pain, anger and criminality if they just stuck to their trade. Ricky Gervais nailed it when he hosted an award ceremony many years ago. Perhaps play the clip after the watershed. That was the Golden Globes. It was the last time he did it, and yeah, it's well worth watching. On Iran, Elisa says, Chris Parry, I should say, talks so much sense. Looking forward to the rest of the show. Well, thank you for that, Elisa. And thanks to so many people who've been in touch. We'll come back to your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in just a second. But I just want to talk now about this very concerning story about bleed kits to be established and to be put on the Transport for London bus network. We never forget that 82% of our viewers and listeners do not live in London, so I never ever want to be a London-centric station. But on London buses, it is clear there is risk. Assembly members in London unanimously passing a motion requesting that Transport for London work with the London Ambulance Service to ensure these bleed kits will be made available across the network. Bleed control kits help stem severe bleeding from deep wounds, stab wounds essentially, before emergency services arrive, a potentially valuable method of saving lives. The Mayor's not obliged to implement it. TfL says it doesn't plan to do it, but certainly there are quite a number of people who want to do it. Ellie Baker, who's London's transport spokeswoman, says, I've heard too often from young people they don't always feel safe, as they should do, travelling. Passing this motion will show that we're listening to young people and backing the investigation of a potentially valuable method of saving lives. What does this honestly say about the fact that you get on a bus, the most common form of public transport in this country, not that the London-centric media would have you believe that, they're all about trains, and bleed kits are being called upon by elected representatives to put on those buses? Well, Peter Blexley is our crime commentator and former Metropolitan Police detective. Peter, what does this say, do you think?
Well, it's very interesting that this motion was debated and passed by the London Youth Assembly. So not the crusty old people like me, but the youth, those people who travel mostly by bus and, as a matter of fact, feel unsafe when travelling by bus. So these youngsters, quite understandably, voted to have bleed kits installed at the bus stations and on certain routes where violence is particularly high. And what has Khan said? No, we're not going to do it. So he's not even listening to his own youth assembly, which is, of course, yet another appalling indictment upon the man who will have you believe that London is safe.
Do you think they should be on buses?
Yeah, without a doubt. Anything that might potentially save a life. And it's not so long ago that there was a murder of a youngster on a bus in Woolwich, which is only a few miles from where I live. Anything that might help save somebody's life has got to be of a benefit. Although apparently some people in the world of first aid are concerned that because these bleed kits carry tourniquets, that if a tourniquet is improperly applied, it can cause some physical damage. But I think in the main, anything that is going to stem the flow of what otherwise would be a fatal stab wound has got to be a good bit of kit and should be deployed.
What does it say about crime, about the dangers people feel and the perception of crime in our capital city, Peter?
Well, it absolutely nails that point that people feel that London is unsafe. And these are the young people elected to the London Youth Assembly. They are the kids getting the bus to and from school. They are the kids getting the buses to and from meeting their friends, going to the cinema, going to sports training, whatever it might be. And they are the ones that are calling for this because they are saying they feel unsafe. And yet, Khan would still have you believe that London is safe, and he will shout down anybody that argues otherwise. And of course, increasingly, the facts speak for themselves. London is increasingly unsafe, and people's perception and concerns and fear of crime is absolutely rampant.
Peter, thank you as always. Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective and one of our key crime commentators here on Talk. What do you think about what he said? Whether you live in London or whether you don't, maybe you visit every now and again. 0344 499 1000. I'd love to hear from you. That's the number that Karen in Chester has called about Farage. Karen, tell us your thoughts on this. You're very welcome to the programme this evening.
Hi, Peter. Okay, I'm going to defend you a little bit. I'm a relatively new listener or viewer because I watch it on YouTube.
Okay.
To Talk.
Yep.
And until I've been watching a few weeks, and until you actually said you were involved with the Conservative Party, I couldn't work out what your politics were.
Right.
Which is a sure sign that you're impartial. I've heard you criticise Farage and Reform. I've also heard you defend them.
I'm sensing a however here, Karen.
No, not at all. But I watch, obviously, I am a Reform supporter in the interest of honesty.
Sure.
And so I watch a lot of the videos, a lot of the stuff that Nigel does. Mm-hmm. And there was a particular video that would have been helpful tonight whereby he was asked outright by a reporter at one of his presentations, would you put boots on the ground? And he was emphatic, absolutely not.
Okay.
And I think what's happened is he said, yes, we should have given access to the air bases to the Americans, and I agree. But I think the question was different when he was at the garage. Was it today or yesterday? We saw what happened over the weekend. Yeah, we saw what happened over the weekend. We saw how the country's embarrassed over what happened. I think what Nigel was trying to say, at the end of the day, he was scoring a bit of a political point. He wasn't saying that he'd changed his mind and he would actively assist the Americans by, bombing Iran or whatever. What it was actually saying was, look at the state. We don't really have a choice. We couldn't help them actively, even if we wanted to.
Okay, Karen.
I think that was the point he was making.
Can I ask you a favour, Karen? And it's okay to say no. I would love you to have, just off air, a quick chat with our assistant producer, Matt, who was the guy who spoke to you before you came on air. Have a quick chat with Matt. If you can send him that clip, if you know where that is or could find it, if it's an easy thing to do. I don't want to take up your whole evening, but if you find that clip between now and 10 o'clock, I will get the team behind the scenes to turn it round and we will play it out before 10 o'clock. Would that be all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
You stay on the line. Matt's going to have a quick chat with you now, Karen, and then we'll find that clip, we'll get it turned round and we'll play it out in the air and we'll put this to bed once and for all. What does Nigel Farage think about boots on the ground? Thank you, Karen, and I'm delighted that you're a new listener, whether you're a new listener, an older listener, someone who's been here since the start, when we started this, when we started Talk Radio as it was then, back in, I think, 2016. No matter how long you've been with us, I'm delighted to have you listening and watching this evening. And Karen's just having a chat with Matt now. We'll see if we can get that clip and we'll play it out before 10 o'clock if we can do that, which I expect we probably can. Leslie says, you ask why aren't ex-military recruited into the police and prison service? The answer is they haven't been to the University of Woke. Well, Leslie, listen, I think that's a very fair point. I went to university. I'd be a rubbish police officer. I'd be absolutely dreadful as a prison officer. officer. I shouldn't do that. That is not my skill set. That's not something I should do. But there are loads of people who'd be really, really good at it. There are also loads of people who should never go to university, saddling themselves with 50, 60 grand worth of debt for no reason. We've got this bizarre system in our country where people have jobs that didn't need a university degree previously. Now they need one because so many people go to university. We also need to completely change our view about what is a respectable profession. I've said this on air before. My friend Tom, for example, he's a PhD, he's a professor now. He earns a heck of a lot less than my friend Rob, who's a plumber, who earns, you know, 6 figures and does a really, really good job. Rob came into my, I sometimes get mates race these days, but he came, one of the first times he came into my bathroom, he spent 7 minutes there fixing a pipe and he charged me 92 quid. So, I mean, who's the real academic? Who's the really smart one? That's my question. We need to totally change our view about education, about what education is, about what skills are, and about what skills we need to make this country work. A university education has its place. I was very privileged to receive one. It worked for me. I loved studying history and politics for 3 years and journalism for another year. Great. Brilliant. It set me up for this job. Fantastic. But loads of people don't need to go to university. We need to change the whole way we think about this. And if you've got views on that, you let me know. 0344 499 1000. Tony in Milan says, how can that vile specimen claim crime in London is going down at the same time we need bleed kits on London buses? What a joke he is. Lee in Saffron Walden says, while I agree that our armed forces need to be bolstered and jobs can be created through the military, we must not lose sight of the fact that these would be public sector jobs that once again the good old taxpayer will have to shell out for, says Lee in Saffron Walden. I tell you something, Lee, I know exactly the point. I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily, but what my point would be is that if we're going to shell out for public service jobs, I'd much rather they be in the army than so many of the civil servants that we do not need, so many of these DEI jobs that we do not need. So I do think we do need to bolster our army. It does need to be bigger. It needs to be something that is stronger. And Leslie says the Islamophobia bill will be a recruitment tool for the Free Speech Union. Leslie, I think you may well be right on that one. In just a second, we're going to talk migration. Furious migrants using the UK as a cash machine, as has been alleged. 1 in 4 non-EU settlers is on universal credit. Yes, really. Britain 2026. Kevin Foster, former immigration minister, coming up on that one. We'll talk about the Iranian women who have defected as well from the football team. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Also, why are people shooting ducks? Horrible, horrible animal cruelty. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch, including one person sort of talking about what we were alluding, that's the word I was looking for, alluding to what we were talking about last night. This is Mr. Watchman, who says, thanks so much for reading out my nationality tweet last night. It provoked a fascinating Zoom discussion with my siblings tonight on how we define ourselves as English and here for 1001 years. It's always good to provoke deep, controversial thought. Well, that's what we try to do here, and we certainly disagree without being disagreeable as well. So I'm delighted that you and your siblings had a good chat about that. I certainly disagree with my one sibling on many, many things, but he's a great guy nonetheless. Tom, my brother, who I'm very proud of, and is a businessman who works extremely hard to provide employment for quite a number of people. Let's talk about 1 in 4 settled status migrants from outside the EU claiming benefits. It's led the Conservatives to warn Britain must not remain a cash machine for the world. There were 179,482 people with indefinite leave to remain, excluding the EU settlement scheme on universal credit in December 2024. The Migration Observatory, using Home Office figures, estimated there were 720,500 non-EU citizens with settlement status at the end of 2024. Kevin Foster's former Immigration Minister. Kevin, just talk us through this and why you think we should be concerned about it.
Well, it's certainly something we should be concerned about. We don't want to see people coming into the country not looking to contribute, or coming in contributing for a short period and then accessing the welfare system after what is a relatively short period. What's interesting, though, Peter, is if you dig into some of the figures. Now, the figures are 1 in 4 of those who are non-EU migrants here have got settled status, permanent, indefinite leave to remain, it's called, permission to live here permanently without having to make further immigration applications. But it's when you look at things like, for example, those granted refugee status, it's 2 in 3 are on universal credit. Now, not all of these people will be unemployed. Universal credit is also paid as a bit of an income supplement to people who are in work. But it's quite stark when you look at some of these numbers, and it obviously says why both the Conservative Party is calling for some change around the rules, and of course the current government, the Labour government, is of course consulting on doubling the time for people to qualify for this status from 5 to 10 years. But that clearly doesn't affect those who are already got the status. And it's also worth noting, Peter, these figures don't include people who had this status but have become British citizens.
Yeah, there's a lot in this as well, and there'll be a lot of people watching and listening to this programme, Kevin, who just think this isn't fair, this isn't how this should work. Is there any reform that you think can actually happen to make this fairer?
Yeah, I think the obvious reform that would come in would be a much longer period for qualification. There'll always be some cases. For example, we might be talking here about some people who are part of the Windrush generation who've been here many decades, who've worked for some years and perhaps approaching retirement in a not particularly well-paid job, who need to access some support at the end. But I think few of us would see the solution of removing them from the country. But in terms of what we should be doing with this, it's a longer period of time to qualify, being tighter in those who arrive. A lot of that's happened. In fact, some of the reforms that happened at the very end of the Conservative government that have been planned about 2 years earlier that were brought in have brought down the numbers. But also it is tackling the situation at the border, because one of the biggest groups that end up of non-EU, people who are not arbitrarily obliged to pay welfare to, who came in the time of free movement. That cohort is growing. With every boatload that arrives, and potentially in future, if you can't remove people from the country, at some point they're going to end up qualifying for this type of assistance.
Yeah, it's interesting. A government spokesman said the Home Secretary recently set out new conditions to get indefinite leave to remain, including being in work and having no criminal record. We are also planning to double the standard time for migrants to settle in the UK to 10 years and increasing the period of time it takes to access benefits. Is that radical enough, do you think?
It'll make a difference, but it doesn't really get to this core issue of, what do you do with those that have come across the channel, who claim asylum, get granted it? Well, what are you actually physically going to do with them if they're still in the country, if you don't wish to pay welfare benefits to them? So there is going to be a need to go further in that front. And also, Siobhan, it is going to have to tackle this issue of what do you do around removing people, given the views on our own backbenches are unlikely to be particularly supportive of the idea that someone who's lost work, who's perhaps been here 6, 7, 8, 9 years, should then potentially be removed from the country if they can't find work, and not be supported by the welfare state here. So, it is sensible to tighten up the rules. I welcome a lot of what the government's saying, but I think it'll be interesting to see when they actually get down to the actual execution of this, actually dealing with some of the individual cases. Will Labour MPs hold their nerve? Well, we've already seen quite a large number complaining about these changes. It'll be interesting to see if they can revert to some of the positions we saw about 6 years ago, when we were actually trying to remove serious criminals from the country to Jamaica, and there was plenty of complaints and very little support from the opposition benches.
Kevin, thank you. That's Kevin Foster there, the former Immigration Minister, joining us this evening. I want to take a call from Annie, who is in Loch Ness, 0344 499 1000. She has given me a ring. Annie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I was just
thinking about the point you were making before about the pressure young people are in to go to university and try to get a degree to get ahead in life. And I was just wanting to make the point that I kind of agree with you. There's this awful pressure that they should go to university, otherwise there's no hope for them. But just my own sort of lived experience, I have 3 adult children in their 20s, and only my daughter wanted to go to university. She went to Bath and got a very good degree, but now she has a great job, but didn't use her degree to get it. And my 2 sons decided not to go to university, and one is a commercial pilot doing really well.
Wow.
And one works on super yachts over in Saudi Arabia. So it's just making the point that, to saddle yourself with all this debt.
Yes.
I don't think that it's really worth. I don't think it's really worth it.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Annie. I think it's a really good point. And there's so much debt that you go into. It's not even 20 years ago when I was at university, I had, I think, maybe £8,000 or £9,000 worth of debt. I paid it off, which is good. Some of my contemporaries have paid it off, some of them haven't. But when you're looking at 5 or 6 times that, it's got to be worth it. You've got to say, is this actually going to give me a job where I can pay this off, and that, sort of cost-benefit analysis. All 3 of your kids have done really, really well, Annie. I'm sure you're very proud of them. And they've taken different routes, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the difference is that the debt that my sons have got, well, actually, I think they've both paid them off now anyway. They've paid that off, but they've also gone into jobs that pay really well without having a degree, whereas my daughter, although she has got a great career now, she'll be paying that debt off for probably decades to come.
Yeah.
And the other quick point is 2 out of my 3 children live and work abroad and have no inkling to come back.
And that's very telling as well, isn't it, Annie?
Absolutely. And I won't encourage them back because they're living their best lives, so it's very telling.
You want what's best for them, but you must miss them too.
I do, but you know what? Technology is great.
Yeah. It's not as if someone moves to Australia and you get a letter from them every 3 months. Annie, I want to ask you 2 more questions before you go. One of them is, do you get free flights?
No, I don't.
Boo! Oh, sorry. Does it at least give you some free pretzels or something?
Not even. Actually, he can arrange a little drink.
Ooh.
If I happen to go on the airline that he works for, but he pays for that. He gets the flight attendants to do it if he knows. But he flies out of Manchester, and I live up in the north of Scotland. So,
leading me to my final question, Annie, which is probably a little bit predictable. Have you ever seen Nessie?
I'd like to say yes. I do actually overlook the loch. My cottage overlooks the loch, but it is beautiful, and I hope Nessie's in there somewhere.
It sounds idyllic where you live. My goodness. Thank you.
I'm out in the rain, actually, walking the dog in the dark.
It's Scotland. It's always going to be raining. Let's face it.
It is.
Yeah, indeed. Annie, is this the first time you've given us a ring?
It is. Yeah, long-time listener, but first-time caller.
Brilliant. Well, give me a ring anytime, Annie. Lovely to chat to you, and I hope your walk with your... What's your dog called?
He's called Archie.
Archie. Well, all the very, very best to you, Annie, and to Archie as well. This is what I love. I thank you, Annie. Much appreciated. This is what I love. I love, I'm in my van and I thought I'd give you a ring. I'm walking my dog and I thought I'd give you a ring. No, I'm sitting in, it's nice and warm, I'm watching on the telly. This is the beauty of this station. No matter where you are, no matter what you're up to, you can give me a ring, you can send me a voice note, whatever is on the tip of your tongue, let me know your thoughts. Annie did that and for the first time, and she's welcome on anytime. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in just a second about this Iranian women's football team. Australia granting 5 Iran women's players refuge as Trump offers them asylum. We talked about it a little bit last night, but my question is, where are all these celebrities? Where are all these people who say they care about women's rights? Where are all these people who bang on all the time about, human rights are so incredibly important? Gary Lineker has said nothing. Philip Kisley will join me on this in just a second. If you have views on this, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Richard says, I'm disgusted at MP Carl Turner. He routinely comes on Talk and tries to give off the impression he's a tough-talking Yorkshireman, and we'll say it as it is. He's been very critical, scathing even, of the proposed bill to limit trial by jury. Yet today in Westminster he said he will abstain from the vote. Despicable. Yeah, certainly the data I've received seems that he has abstained from that vote. I'd love to talk to him about that. He has been on the station already today, but we'll maybe try and speak to him tomorrow on that. Wendy says, I faced a lot of pressure to go to university. No one in my family had ever been, so I went to please my parents. I hated it. I dropped out. My mother was devastated, but now I earn 6 figures, much more than my friends who got degrees. University isn't the ticket to a career like it was in the 1980s. Well, it certainly sounds like you've done the right thing. And interestingly, Thomas in London has been in touch. He graduated in 2022 and has given me the figures that Thomas was that he had borrowed and paid back. So the total that Thomas had borrowed was £72,252.27. That's a whacking great amount of money, 72 grand. He's paid back in the last 4 years. He's paid back, well, not quite 4 years, but nearly 4 years, £1,276. But in that time, on the Plan 2 loan, these controversial loans, £2,223.67 has been added in interest. So he hasn't even covered the interest yet. In fact, he's covered, what, about half the interest, actually, a bit more than half the interest, and he still has a good 70 grand to pay back. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens with Thomas. And Thomas, thank you very much for sending that in after graduating in 2022. I want to talk now about the Iranian women's football team. We talked about this a little bit last night. Australia granting 5 Iran women's players refuge as Trump offers them asylum. And Anthony Albanese, who's the Prime Minister of Australia, has been praised for this after initially saying the country was making a mistake for potentially allowing the team to return to Iran. Now, 5 women's team's players granted refuge in Australia, and Donald Trump offering to fly the whole squad to safety in the United States. This is what we've heard from Gary Lineker about it. Absolutely nothing. And this is what we've heard from Ian Wright about it. Absolutely nothing. And what about all those other virtue signalling celebrities who say they care about women's rights, who say they care about human rights? Absolutely nothing. Philip Kisley is a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Philip, are you in any way surprised by this?
Alas, I'm not. Hello, Peter. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
No, this is the kind of constipated silence that we always get, isn't it? When these people are confronted with something that is uncomfortable for them. They are confronted with an uncomfortable truth. And this is the problem you have if you say to yourself, I am going to get in bed with my enemy's enemy because I hate my own culture, I hate the West, and I mythologize everything else beyond the West. I mythologize the global South and the Middle East. So this is kind of what happens, really. Yeah, I was looking for anything from Dawn French in particular. I was looking for her to say no or it's complicated, but she didn't say a single thing.
Funny that, isn't it? It's almost as if Israel's always wrong.
It's almost as if that, as you said before, this isn't about human rights. This isn't anti-war. This is anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic, and it's anti-American. Now, the left and the woke left, which is a relatively recent manifestation of this, but the left, right from the first new left of the post-war era, E.P. Thompson, Raymond Williams, and all of that kind of thing, there's always been a massive strain of anti-Americanism in that kind of intellectual school of thought. And of course it went on steroids in the 60s and 70s. But it's here to stay, and now it's manifesting itself in, tears for the Ayatollah, tears for Hitler. This is kind of, they are umming and ahhing and saying, oh, well, we shouldn't go to war, and, we shouldn't free Iran. Of course we should free Palestine, not from Hamas. I don't know what we're freeing Palestine from, but we must not free Iran. Let the women who dare to show their hair have their eye poked out, or if they they dare to.
And the first thing, and interestingly, you mentioned about headscarves, and I mean, the first thing those women did when they were free, when they were at a safe location in Australia, they took their headscarves off, and that was very telling, I thought.
Well, they took their headscarves off, and of course they didn't sing the national anthem. And then they did sing the national anthem, but of course they have the Iranian Guard looking after them, so you can't help but think they were coerced into doing that. And of course, I think a commentator, a very conservative commentator in Iran, said that they must be punished on their way back. So when they get back, so whatever happens, if these women ever go back to Iran under the regime, they are going to be punished, and we can probably understand that punishment as death or mutilation.
And it's absolutely heartbreaking when you think about the 5 women who have defected, because they're leaving their families behind, and they know their families will be at the very least complete pariahs under this regime. Some people may be put to death. They will be certainly ostracised, and punishments will ensue. I mean, it is an awful choice, but on a dilemma none of us will ever face. But it shows you time and time again, does it not, the risks people are willing to take. And also, when you have a people, the people of Iran who should be free, who are essentially welcoming the bombs to their country, it puts into sharp relief the incredibly difficult dilemma they face with such a horrendous, awful, repressive regime. And I'm not sure so many of these virtue signalling celebrities know, or worse, care about that, Philip.
No, they're in their safe European homes, and it's the ultimate expression of spoiled privilege, isn't it? I'll just give you a quick story, Peter. I was at the Battle of Ideas Festival on Saturday. It was up in Manchester. You've probably been to the London one, and we were talking. We're actually talking about sovereignty, but obviously Iran and the Iran war came up, and an Iranian guy stood up and said, you know, we desperately want this war to happen. People were dancing in the street. It was dangerous. For all sorts of reasons, and not just because of the bombs, but we desperately want this war to happen. The Ayatollah was worse than Hitler to us. So this is what the Iranians are saying, and the so-called progressives in the West, who apparently know better, are pushing back on that stuff. And they're pushing back on that stuff, as we've said before, Peter, for 2 main reasons. One, because they hate America, and it's framed as anti-imperialism, and one, because they hate Jews and Israel, and it's framed as anti-Zionism. And what happens when you get in bed with your enemy will turn around at some stage, and they will not say no. Yeah. And that is the dilemma that people like Zach Polanski and all of the leftist progressives face at the moment, and that will probably come to them sooner rather than later.
Philip, very interesting to talk to you as always. Philip Kisley there, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. We're going to be talking in the next hour about cruelty towards animals, especially when it comes to people taking pot shots at ducks. This is something that is continuing. We're also talking about crufts, which I think should be banned. The person who's won it, the breeder, has come out that he had an animal cruelty conviction some time ago, but still something we should talk about. Tony in Milan says senseless killing of animals should result in jail. The number of people that start with that and then go on to commit violent crimes against humans is statistically significant. All cruelty to animals is a disgrace. And Mel says, I completely agree with you. You don't need university to get ahead in life. If anything, it inhibits many. I've been in hospitality for over 15 years and just recently returned to retail in a luxury Swiss chocolate company, and I feel so lucky to enjoy what I do. By the way, so happy to see you in the evening, says Mel in Manchester. Mel, do you know what would put an even bigger smile on my face? If you sent me some of those free samples of that Swiss chocolate. What a great job you have. So much to discuss in the next hour, including jury trials. We'll talk to you in just a second.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 9 o'clock. So much to discuss, including that vote in Parliament about jury trials. The government's won it, but at what cost? Only about 10 rebels, but many people very unhappy about that. We're also going to talk about animal cruelty. Lots of people reacting online to this about people using catapults to take pot shots at ducks. Absolutely horrendous. And the Crufts winner, the breeder, who has an animal cruelty conviction. Yes, it was 20 years ago, but surely those people should not be breeding animals, especially when it comes to Crufts, which I would ban. Lots to discuss on all of that. We're also going to talk a bit more about Iran and about the Renters' Rights Bill as well. Landlords have been urged to prepare for the start of it. Some interesting information coming out of the north of England as well. One of our regular texters giving me some information about that. We're going to talk about that later on the programme. Also, the value or otherwise of a university education, to say nothing about what Donald Trump has been saying about Iran. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Whatever is on the tip of your tongue, whatever you want to talk to me about, give me a shout right now. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute please for those. You can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on Talk between now and 10. Stay with us. So we know in the last couple of hours the Courts and Tribunals Bill at second reading might sound a bit dull, but actually the whole principle of jury trials, certainly for convictions that would send you to prison for 3 years or less, has been passed anyway, but many people very annoyed about it. Carl Turner, the Labour MP, has spoken to the station already today. He has abstained on it. The government's won 304 to 203, and if we just look at some of the people who voted against, no great surprise for some of the Labour rebels: Afsana Begum, Richard Bergen, Ian Byrne, Imran Hussain, Kim Johnson, Ian Lavery, John McDonnell, Bell Ribeiro-Adi, John Trickett and Nadia Whittam. They are, all of them really, have been critics of Keir Starmer in many different ways. Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn, people like Rosie Duffield voting against it. And Rupert Lowe as well has voted against it, as have all the Reform UK MPs who were there, 6 of them: Richard Tice, Andrew Rossendale, Sarah Puchin, Danny Kruger, Robert Jenrick and Lee Anderson. So lots in this, and we will discuss this as the show goes on. Let me speak to Ben in London, who has some thoughts about this. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Ben, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say on this?
Hi, Ben. Hi, Ben. Hi, Peter.
Hello there.
Mainly, what I would like to say is that the problem is that a lot of these court cases are going to go to magistrates. Magistrates actually only have legal counsel. They don't have proper, it's legal advisors. So when it gets to a position where, how can you say it, a case is actually agreed within the courts, then they want to appeal. They go to Crown Court.
Yeah.
Under this new law, it will then go to the single judge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are countless and countless evidences of magistrates, and because they only have legal advice, not legal counsel, legal advice, they get it wrong. Then it goes up to then Crown Court, then it's now down to a single judge.
Yeah.
And then that is the state.
Do you worry about the fairness of all of this, Ben?
I do, because then the state is deciding. The state is deciding, not the people.
Well, I mean, the judiciary is meant to be independent of the government.
No, because it becomes down from the magistrates up. And I think a lot of people are missing the point. it comes from the magistrates up and it goes to the Crown Court. So once it goes to the magistrates up to the Crown Court, it's going to go to a single judge.
Yeah.
And that is where a lot of the continuity is gone.
Very interesting points, Ben. Listen, thank you. That's Ben in London there on those jury trials. And quite a few people getting in touch about this, including Louis. He says, I do not think MPs should be able to abstain. It should either be a yes or a no vote. Also on free speech, lots of discussion about that today. Marty saying, why isn't there Christianophobia? There must be an explanation why this government is choosing to protect just one religion. There are, of course, laws that say that you shouldn't be subject to any form of discrimination on the basis of things like your race, your religion, and so on. Why does there have to be something specifically on Islamophobia? Well, you could argue the same about anti-Semitism, I suppose. We'll talk about that in a minute or two. Also, on university education, loads of people getting in touch about this, including one person says, I'm an electrician, all my friends went to university, one went into the police, very respectable career, I make more money than all these guys. Yes, I can imagine you're laughing all the way to the bank, Sparky. Ian from Glasgow says, cruelty to animals is abhorrent and should be taken much more seriously in this country. Anyone who deliberately harms an innocent animal should face an automatic jail sentence and a lifetime ban from keeping pets. Great show, says Ian in Glasgow. Well, we're going to talk to Dominic Dyer about this later on. We actually had him on twice last week, but there's so many different stories, and Dominic speaks such complete common sense on all of this. He did once stand for the Liberal Democrats, but all of us have skeletons in our past. There's all sorts of really, really sensible things on this, things to say on this, including the fact that the Crufts champion dog handler has a previous animal cruelty convention. This is absolutely dreadful. The breeder behind the Crufts 2026 Best in Show winner has a previous conviction for animal cruelty. There's a man called Lee Cox, who guided a Clumber Spaniel to the top spot at the dog show in Birmingham on Sunday, beating 18,000 competitors, but he was previously found guilty of causing unnecessary suffering to a dog in his care. He was convicted about a black cocker spaniel named Adam following a 3-day trial at Sedgemoor Magistrates Court in September 2001. A Royal Kennel Club spokesman confirmed Mr Cox's conviction, but said it was an isolated incident 25 years ago, adding Mr Cox has an unblemished record in the 25 years since. Well, maybe. I mean, you might have an unblemished record 25 years on, but actually if you did something 25 years ago that's to do with cruelty to animals, should you be actually even allowed to enter Crufts? Surely that should exclude you, even though I think that Crufts shouldn't actually happen. It shouldn't be. I don't think we should be showing off bred dogs. I don't think that should be something that we should be saying is a good thing at all. I want to talk more about the jury trials in just a second, actually. Do we have Jim Allister now? Yes, Jim Allister is going to join us. He is the traditional unionist voice MP for North Antrim in Northern Ireland. He voted against this. He's also a barrister of some renown, and Jim has a long career in politics. I've known him for 15 years, but actually, I mean, his political career has certainly been a very successful one, but his legal career previously, he really was one of the top barristers in Northern Ireland. Certainly when it came to the cases he was involved with. Jim, thank you for joining me this evening. Can you just explain why you voted against the Courts and Tribunals Bill?
Well, because this bill radically changes something that's been fundamental to our criminal justice system. The Justice Secretary today described juries as the cornerstone of our criminal justice system. Well, if he's right about that, and he is, then what he's trying to remove is something which is foundational to everything else within the criminal justice system. That's what it means to have a cornerstone. It's that upon which other things are built and depend. And if you remove that, then you're not just fundamentally departing from what for centuries has been operative, but you're doing it in a retrograde way. Because, take myself. I have, in my professional life, operated as a criminal barrister in the courts in Northern Ireland, where we had experience of both jury trials and, because of the terrorist campaign, of flip-flop courts, which was judge alone. Now, anyone who participated in that, myself included, but also those who appeared before, who were charged before those courts, I think the almost unanimous view would be that there was a far fairer and better trial where it was a jury.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jim, but you, of course, know all about it back to front because you've appeared in many of them. I know what diplock courts are, but certainly for our viewers in other parts of the UK and beyond, as Jim correctly says, this was because it was a real risk to be a member of a jury in Northern Ireland. People, a small place, people know who you are. And of course, as that terrorism campaign was there for 30 years by the IRA and loyalist paramilitaries, you could become a target. But as Jim is saying here, and I'll stop interrupting him in a second, a jury trial would have been fairer and would have been the kind of ideal outcome, wouldn't it, Jim?
Oh, absolutely, because, you know, to be judged by 12 peers is far superior because they have the lived life experience that no judge, no matter how elevated he is, no matter how erudite he is, he doesn't have the lived experience of ordinary people judging other ordinary people. And indeed, I say even for victims, there's likely to be far more affinity and connection between a victim giving evidence and a jury of their peers, as well as the peers of the accused. So whether it's the victim or whether it's the accused, I think they get a far better hearing from the jury. And certainly at the end of that process, even for anyone who's convicted, I think most would say that at least they had a chance in terms of a jury because it's their own peers who are convicting them. So I think that's why we've had jury service. That's why we have had this distinction between the finders of fact, namely the juries, and those then, if there is a conviction, who sentence, namely the judge. And I think that has served as well. Now the government wants to wipe that away for a huge number of cases.
It is a very, very significant number of cases. And you talked about getting a fair hearing. You're someone who has very strong opinions on lots of things, but I'm sure you will have listened to every word of this debate, or almost every word of this debate in Parliament. What was David Lammy and his ministers in the Ministry of Justice actually saying was the benefit of this? Because I've spoken to so many barristers and other members of the legal profession and MPs as well who cannot work out what the actual benefit of this was meant to be. It's not going to speed up court cases. It's not going to deal with the backlog.
Well, the government's contention, and really their only contention, was that it would deal with the backlog. Of course it won't. The problem creating the backlog isn't jury trials. Indeed, trial by judge alone could be slower because at the end of a jury trial, you get a verdict. But at the end of a judge alone trial, you get a verdict which then has to be written up very comprehensively by the judge, taking judge time when otherwise they could be sitting in court, dealing with further cases. So I do not believe for one moment that it is likely to shorten the process or to save time. You know, we have got these delays in our courts for a multiplicity of reasons, very often because there's delays in producing prisoners from prisons. They're often, when a trial is ready to start, suddenly discovered that some of the disclosure which should have been made hasn't been made, so there's a delay. And there can be a multiplicity of reasons, none of which have got to do with the fact that it's a jury rather than a judge alone. So I really do think that the Justice Secretary today was scrambling around to find excuses. I think there was one significant point. The actual courts minister, the junior minister, conceded in January when we first debated this, that even if there weren't the problem of delays, she would want to bring in this legislation. So that shows that it's an ideological belief, not a practical necessity. And that worries me.
What are your concerns about the ideology behind this?
Well, that ordinary citizens should be deprived of the right to have their cases adjudicated by their peers, by a jury. Because let's face it, the judges do become case hardened. No matter how experienced that judge is, how careful he or she is, and we've heard it all before, they do become case hardened. Whereas a jury have the lived experience very often of those they're hearing from, and will more likely reach a balanced verdict.
It's interesting, Ernie's been in touch on text and says, Peter, after the scrapping of jury trials is just another nail in the coffin of democracy by the socialist government. Not many more to hammer home before it's completely buried. I just wonder, Jim, what you think about this principle. I mean, do you see this as a move by a socialist government? Do you see it as that? Is that too strong, the ideology behind this?
When the courts minister admits that there is an ideology that she certainly adheres to, and she'd do this whether or not there were delays, then that is concerning, because that is saying that something that's been in existence right back to the days of Magna Carta should be diminished and assaulted and reduced, so that a lot of people who'd appear in court would appear without a jury, and indeed those who would be appearing in the summary court, in the magistrates' court, would, in very many cases, not have the rights of appeal that they presently have. And an interesting statistic today was that from our summary jurisdiction courts, our magistrates' courts, those people who appealed their conviction, 41% are successful. That means that in 41% of those cases that were appealed, there'd been an injustice. And that was from a single person deciding the case who got it wrong. Now, justice, there has to be justice, but it has to be seen to be done. There has to be confidence. And I think one of the biggest dangers here is that public confidence in our criminal justice system would be diminished if we remove jury trials. It is a cornerstone of our criminal justice system. You cannot remove it. And, and when you talk about democracy, a cornerstone of democracy is voting. It would be preposterous to remove that cornerstone. It's just as preposterous to move the cornerstone of juries from our criminal justice system.
Jim, thank you. That's Jim Allister there, who's a barrister and MP for North Antrim for Traditional Unionist Voice. Very, very highly regarded and decorated barrister in Northern Ireland before, well, alongside his political career, actually, which has been there for some years, joining us there on jury trials. What do you think about this? Do you agree with Jim? What do you think about what Labour has done? 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about animal welfare after the break, something I really care about. The two stories, one about this breeder behind the 2026 Crufts winner who had an animal cruelty conviction from 25 years ago. I mean, I just love it when people say these things like it was an isolated incident 25 years ago. Like, if someone's been involved in animal cruelty, I don't want them anywhere near animals. I don't want them breeding dogs. I don't want them breeding dogs anyway, because I don't think people should breed dogs, and I know I've got very strong views on that. But we'll talk to Dominic Dyer, the animal welfare campaigner. Also a horrendous story about people taking pot shots at ducks as well. Dominic will talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit later on about landlords preparing for the start of the Renters' Rights Act and some disturbing detail that has come out of that. Jason in the Lake District, who you may hear me mentioning a few times, he often texts into the programme, a very, very loyal viewer and listener to the programme, and he's given me some information about what's going on in his patch, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the programme. We'll take your calls too on anything you want to talk about. Maybe it's Nigel Farage, maybe it's renters' rights, maybe it's jury trial, maybe it's animal rights, whatever you want to talk about, Iranian rights. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Really disturbing news that teenagers are killing pet ducks with catapults as part of a social media trend. Absolutely disgusting. And this is teenagers attacking wildlife with these projectiles. Their attacks, the police are looking for 2 suspects seen running away from the back garden of a property in Dorset last month, 22nd of February. The attack taking place following claims there's been a surge in wildlife being targeted with catapults. Dominic Dyer is an absolutely indefatigable animal welfare campaigner. And Dominic, I know you've spoken to parliamentarians about this in Parliament. Just tell us what is actually happening now, because it's really dreadful.
Yes, this is a growing problem. We had an event in Parliament last week organised by the Nature Watch Foundation that have been doing excellent work on this issue, where we were really targeting MPs to bring them up to speed on what's actually happening out there. And yes, we have widespread use of high-powered catapults with steel projectiles being, used in these catapults.
So
to target
things like ball bearings, would they be?
Absolutely, yeah. Wild animals and domestic animals. So, swans, deer, foxes, cats. This is becoming a widespread problem. And these gangs are then actually sharing all of this on WhatsApp groups or also on social media. And, it's basically leading more people to get involved in wildlife criminal activity. And we're seriously concerned that in turn will lead them to obviously go into the sort of judicial system being arrested, but also potentially going into, human related crime, because we've got so much evidence to show that if you're violent to animals at a young age, often that leads to violence to humans as you get into adult life as well. So the police are taking this very seriously. We are trying to do a number of things. Firstly, say to politicians that we need restrictions on the sale of these products, and we don't have them at the moment. You can go onto Amazon online, you can go into stores and buy these products, and they are very dangerous weapons in the wrong hands, not just for animals, but also for people as well. If you get hit by one of these projectiles from these devices in the head, it could kill you. So this is extremely dangerous. At the moment, no restrictions at all. And we actually went to Amazon last week after we were in Parliament and handed in a petition. And I've actually tried to put pressure on them to say, listen, take some responsibility for the sale of these types of products. So far, I'm afraid they haven't done an awful lot about it.
Have they replied to you at all, Dominic?
They haven't replied. Gumtree have actually put restrictions on the sale of these products online. So some of the online retailers and platforms are beginning to take action, and all credit to Nature Watch, all credit to the RSPCA and other organisations like League Against Cruel Sports that have been doing good work in this area. MPs are taking more of an interest. We had over 60 MPs engage with us in Parliament last week. They are talking, they are picking this up from their constituents are concerned. Mayor of London and other mayors around the country are concerned because this is an urban problem, but also it's happening in towns and villages as well. And it's a serious issue that we've got to get hold of.
Linda says these weapons should be banned. Bring back Borstal for these thugs. Sometimes you have to teach young thugs the hard way. And another person says this is so upsetting. Hard to understand what mindset causes anyone to inflict deliberate pain on the defenceless. The catapults should obviously be banned. But what can be done about a lack of compassion? That's the wider question, isn't it, Dominic?
It's an education issue, I think. If you look at charities like Born Free that I work with, we do quite a lot of work, going into schools and colleges, educating people about animal welfare and wildlife protection. You've got to get to people young, and you've got to tell them that actually, there is things that we should do in terms of, being good to animals and nature. It's something that will improve us as human beings as we get older. And most young people want to engage with that. But there are others that get into these bad sort of criminal activities with gangs and things, and it leads to violence and the horrors that we're seeing. So it's an education system in schools. It's an education system in the home. So I think parents need to treat their children and educate them about compassion towards animals. And the police have to be out there doing what they're doing, the enforcement authorities, and we have to try and control these things. It's a wider problem also. It's not just catapults. We also have air guns, and we also have crossbows as well, all of which are not regulated and controlled enough in terms of sale and access to these dangerous weapons by young people. So, we've got to take this seriously, and we are seeing a growing problem across the country.
If anyone even considers taking these horrendous actions, my message is very simple and very clear. Duck off. Right then, let's talk about Crufts. The 2026 Best in Show winner has a previous conviction for animal cruelty. I don't know about you, Dominic, I ban Crufts.
Yeah, Crofts has gone through significant change because it's gone under a lot of pressure over the years. How the dogs have been bred and some of the health and animal welfare issues there, how dogs are treated in the ring. And this year there's been cases of dogs being hit and struck, when they're actually moving around. And we can see some of that. I don't agree with any of that. There are some good elements where they've improved things. They've got scruffs where they promote rescue dogs and crossbreeds and, awareness around what's going on around the world with dog welfare. But there are still some real blind spots here. The Kennel Club said that, they did actually know about this criminal offence. They did know that this dog breeder had been subject to a conditional discharge and a fine. The dog concerned, I think there was one that he was breeding, had his ear amputated because it had got some infection. So it was poor animal welfare in a breeding environment that he was running, a kennel environment. But they said it was a long time ago and that, he'd learned his lessons and they didn't think they needed to restrict him from entering Crufts because of this past conviction. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think
it sends a dreadful message. And absolutely, this is an isolated incident 25 years ago. I mean, there's so many people who did horrendous things 25 years ago who don't do them now. It doesn't make them good people.
No, it doesn't. And I don't think it makes the Kennel Club, look good in relation to this particular incident. And it sets back a lot of what they would consider good work to try and restore the image of Crofts. Remember, it wasn't even televised for many years. It became so controversial, the BBC pulled the plug on it until Channel 4 picked it up again a few years ago. So, yeah, I think this is another serious case of dropping the ball when it comes to animal welfare. And I think they need to learn lessons from it.
Thank you very much, Dominic. As always, Dominic Dyer there, an animal welfare campaigner. Let me just read out the Royal Kennel Club statement from the spokesman. We can confirm that in 2001, Lee Cox, winner of the Crufts 2026 Best in Show Award, was involved in the court case relating to a Cocker Spaniel who had a chronic ear infection. The court issued a conditional discharge. Convictions involving animal welfare are always reviewed by the Royal Kennel Club, and due reflection will be given to the way the courts treat such convictions. In this case, an appropriate sanction was imposed by the disciplinary committee reflecting the court decision and did not warrant a disqualification. This was an isolated incident 25 years ago. Mr. Cox has had an unblemished record in the 25 years since this incident, making a significant positive contribution to the world of dogs. Well, lots of people have been in touch about this, particularly the ducks. Nat in Tel Aviv says, we love ducks here in Israel. These people are scumbags. Thank you to Leslie. Says, we're going to need bigger prisons when the lefty judges hand out guilty sentences. And Ellie says, did I hear that correctly? I thought you were going to be the early morning show. I'm not quite sure where that's come from, Ellie, but no, I'm the evening show between 7 and 10. So thank you very much. Just to clarify that matter. We're going to talk about renters in just a second. Some kind of disturbing news about rents going up, which has been sent to me by Jason in the Lake District, who's a regular correspondent of the show, very, very valued viewer and listener. And we're going to talk about that because landlords are preparing for the start of the Renters' Rights Act. Maybe you're someone who rents out a home, maybe you're someone who pays rent, whatever your views on this and whatever your views on the ducks and indeed the dogs are, you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We'll take plenty of calls between now and 10 o'clock as well. So do get in touch. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile. and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody who has been in touch. I just want to read you something from Jason in the Lake District, who has sent this to me. He's, as I say, a regular correspondent, someone who listens to these shows all the time, and I really do appreciate any viewers and listeners who send things in, people who suggest stories. There are regular people who message me on Twitter and say you should be covering this. We can't cover every single thing that I'm sent because we just don't have time, and sometimes our audience is not necessarily interested in everything that's sent, but I really, really appreciate people who send me stories, and you can on Twitter. I'm at Peter Cardwell. Jason says a fairly big story up here in Carlisle. He's in the Lake District and near Carlisle. There might be of interest. Citadel Homes, the largest landlord in Carlisle, are putting their rents up by around 30% ahead of the 1st of May Renters' Rights Bill coming into effect. It's the main story on the local ITV news here. Lots of locals have had to leave their homes because of the rises. Julie Minns, the Labour MP for the area, was interviewed on the telly, and it appears that landlords across the region are increasing their rents significantly before the legislation comes in. Well, let's just get a view on this from Julie Ford, who's a lettings expert on the Renters' Rights Act. Julie, big changes coming, clearly in Carlisle, but across the country too as well. What are landlords doing, and are they jacking up the rents?
Hi, Peter. Thank you for having me on. I don't think that landlords are jacking the rents up as a whole. Certainly when we've looked at the rental price index for February, rents have actually gone down by a very small percent. I think there are some landlords out there that are panicking, and they are putting the rent up because they think they're not going to be able to in the new world of the Renters' Rights Act. But ultimately, I think the Carlisle issue is more of an isolated incident than everything that's happening across the country.
Why are they panicking? Why are people, in some cases, putting rents up? Because there will be some fundamental changes in this Renters' Rights Act for people who are renting and also people who are renting out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a general rule, as human beings, we don't like change. And this is the biggest change that we've seen in rental legislation in 30 years. So people don't like to change what they're doing, and they also fear what they don't know. We haven't had a lot of information from the government in regards to letting the general public know what the changes are going to be and how that's going to affect both landlords and tenants in the future. And I think realistically, the government need to get their ducks in a row and start educating people, because we're only a few weeks away from that change now.
And what changes will we see? What are the sort of headline things and rights, for example, that people will have?
Absolutely. So there's quite a long list, but I'll go with the key ones that are the most important. So the first is the end of fixed term tenancies. So at the moment, when you go to rent a property, you are either given a fixed term tenancy of 6, 12 or 18 months. That gives landlord and tenant security to know someone's living in that property for that set period of time. From the 1st of May, we won't have that anymore. So tenants will be on rolling, periodic, month-by-month tenancies. So that security has been taken away. However, to counter that, the government are also removing Section 21s, which are basically commonly known as no-fault notices. So the tenant's done nothing wrong, landlord just wants his house back, please. And these are usually commonly used when a landlord wants to sell or move back in, for example. And if you were on a rolling contract, they could be issued at any point. So they were a little bit scary for tenants, so that's being removed. And then we've got other things coming in, such as rent increases. Rent increases can only happen once a year using a Section 13 notice, whereas at the moment they can be increased because there is a rent increase clause in the tenancy agreement, or, for example, just mutual agreement between landlord and tenant. And obviously a change to possession rules as well without Section 21.
Where's the power dynamic shifting here? It seems that, I mean, it's called the Renters' Rights Act. This is clearly giving renters more rights, but there are a lot of people, including a lot of my viewers and listeners, who maybe have 1 or 2 properties, maybe an investment or a family property, things like that. Lots of renters listen and watch this programme as well, but a lot of people who might be thinking, actually, is it worth it anymore to rent out one or 2 properties, especially with this added legislation?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer, because property is really subjective. It's how your situation is, your personal finances, whether you're using that for a pension, whether it's a side hustle. So all of those things come into that. But ultimately, I think the Renters' Rights Act it's the change that we needed, but I don't think it's the correct change. I think it was rushed through Parliament, and I don't think it actually gives the tenants the security that it's designed to. And I think it scared landlords where it didn't need to.
Okay, listen, thank you, Julie. That's Julie Ford, a lettings expert on the Renters' Rights Act. If you have any comments on that, do give me a shout between now and 10 o'clock, 0344 499 1000. We're giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday the 5th of July with a full racing green trackside experience. This is the ultimate setup for race day. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and Village Corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock, and access to the hospitality shuttle bus for easy on-site transport, racing simulators and live music between sessions, all-day street food and an open bar. Listen up to find out how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Conflict breaks out anywhere in the world, it has consequences here at home. Talk War is your definitive national security briefing. From the conflict in Ukraine to the tensions in Gaza and the latest escalation with Iran, this is where you'll find comprehensive comment and expert analysis with multiple updates throughout the day. The Talk War podcast from Talk, available on the Talk app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Jilly is in Manchester and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Jilly, I think you want to talk about jury trials. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, thanks so much for taking my call. I don't know if you can even answer this question. It might be coming from naivety. But this is our country collectively as British people. The government don't own it. And my brain can't get around the fact that they're changing a fundamental of our
of the way our country runs. That we've had jury trials for what, 800 years,
and we'll still have them. Jury trials will still exist, but not for things where the sentence is 3 years or less.
Yeah, but who's decided that? A government comes in; they're a guardian of the country. They don't own the country. They can't fundamentally.
I'm absolutely on your side, Gilly. I think this is crazy. I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think it's going to save any money, and I don't think it's going to give people better access to justice.
But if it's our country collectively, what can we do about it? It wasn't in their manifesto, so it doesn't help to say, oh, well, the majority of the people voted this government in, because it wasn't in their manifesto.
They are the democratically elected government of this country, though, Gilly, and they can do what they want subject to Parliament and Parliament voting this through. I totally get your frustration. What I would say, and the way to change it, I suppose, is to vote for a party the next time that would reverse this. I do wonder, and I worry about a lot of this change, because it may not be a priority for the next government. Whoever they are, they may just say, well, actually, it's done, it's a change that's happened, we'll just have to live with it.
It's a very big worry, and when you add up all the little pieces of all the changes that this horrendous government is implementing, it makes a very, very scary picture.
Gilly, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I do think there's a slightly sinister element to this. I just don't know what the point of it is, apart from people taking people's rights to jury trials away. And I don't know if you heard Jim Allister earlier on, but a frightening statistic was that if a magistrate convicts you of something and you appeal, 41% of those convictions are overturned. So 41% of the time it is judged that a magistrate gets it wrong when they convict someone. So actually that would be taken away.
Yeah, it's scary. I actually personally know a magistrate, and within her circle, none of them want this. They don't want the added pressure.
You're absolutely right, Gilly. I have found no one. I know a lot of people in the law. I have found not a single solicitor, not a single barrister who thinks this is a good idea. I even know people in the Ministry of Justice, where I used to work, who don't think this is a good idea. It's David Lammy going on a solo run here. It's the government deciding what they want. Yeah, it's democratic. It's voted through and whatever, but it's mad.
It is insane. It is scary.
Well, Gilly, we'll see how this develops. But listen, thank you for your call. That's Gilly in Manchester there. William, who's in Lisburn in Northern Ireland, has some thoughts about this. William, you have a bit of law experience yourself?
Yeah, well, maybe 30 years of it. Not to the same extent as Mr. Allister, but I think it's very, very, very sinister. I think it's heading towards something like Putin's Russia with a 99% conviction rate if you upset
Why do you think they're doing it? Do you honestly think this is some sort of socialistic principle?
It's a big stick. It's if you don't behave, it's like that lady that was said something silly on the internet and they flew her inside for 2 years. It's a way of keeping the low-hanging fruit. It's the old saying in law, go for the low-hanging fruit all the time, put them in their place. Problem is, if you're still a criminal conviction, doesn't matter if it's 3 years or not. If you try to appeal, how can you? You can't argue that the jury was misdirected. You can't argue that there was a procedural error. The judge has to go away and take time. Where's the time saving in this? The judge has to go and give a written judgment. And what appeal court is going to second guess?
Yes.
A written judgment if he's taken the time to do it.
You know what you're talking about here, William. When you were you a solicitor, or you worked in the law, or what did you do?
No, I was in the police.
Okay.
Sergeant, whatever.
So you've given evidence in court. You've seen how these. I
had to do it right. Well, used to Crown Courts and everything's about.
Yeah, I mean, would you sometimes be frustrated by what juries did if people got off, or if I mean, why do you think that?
No, it's not my place to do that. My beef is that you can always before, if you didn't like it, you could appeal.
Yeah.
You could appeal the thing. If you didn't like what the police did, you could appeal it. The thing is, who is going to? How is a barrister going to challenge a conviction if he can't argue that a jury is misdirected? If there is no jury, if there was no procedural error, or they made an irrational judgment, can't, because the judge, as Mr. Allister said, has to go away and give a written judgment. So that's going to take however long. Yeah. I think it's a big stick to hit people. Like, say this, if you upset somebody over religion or something like that, especially as they brought in the new guidelines when there already is law for discrimination against religion. So
I think you're talking an awful lot of common sense there, William. And just before you go, I mean, God forbid someone you know were up against, were charged with something. Why do you think it's better to have a jury trial? Because some people might say, if we're just playing devil's advocate for a second, I think we agree on this point, William, wholeheartedly. But what about people say, well, actually, judges have greater knowledge of the law, and 12 people off the street might get it wrong?
My experience is that judges direct the jury. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And the jury can see your face, they can see your demeanour. That's another issue. They can see you, and they can judge, is this guy's evidence good, one thing or another. It's not my place to say it, but you could argue that some judges, I've heard judges in the paper saying that they're activist judge. You shouldn't be an activist judge.
No, of course not.
Really, or you shouldn't be an activist lawyer. Really, you're entitled to, but
yeah. William,
that's the whole idea of the thing, that you're judged by your peers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can be appealed.
William, listen, thanks for your common sense this evening. I really appreciate it. I also appreciate every single day you served in uniform to keep people like me safe in Northern Ireland, so I really appreciate that. That's William in Lisburn there. Let's go to Kevin in Leicester on this Islamophobia definition. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening.
Hello there.
Speak to you. Hello there, mate. Going on your last two callers as well, although I'm reading up about the Islamophobia thing, you think how easy that could be? It's something, Lucy Connolly, I know she wrote something, but how easily you can be arrested for something, and how that can link these two situations today, both on the same day. It is scary. It is quite scary, but mine's more of a different angle. I actually know, well, many, I'm sure we all do, we all know many Muslims. I delivered to some, and I actually spoke to a couple of Muslims today, one of my deliveries, and I just said to them, I said, are you happy with this thing that's coming in? Because I get on with them, and they're like, no, actually, it's a bad thing. Because it attracts attention. It's going to make the British people dig their heels in and argue it. We don't need it.
I think that makes perfect sense, Kevin. And there are loads of different ways that minorities are protected already. There's lots of different legislation on this, lots of different laws, and I'm not sure we need this definition, because I've read it. I read the whole thing out earlier on today, and I think that it will actually stifle free speech.
Yeah, I do. And I don't think it is a benefit to the Muslims. I think it's more of a benefit to a government. And another thing they said, a key thing that they said just quickly, they just said, we don't need this. Your laws are that soft and weak. Your governments are that weak. We don't need anything. This system's so easy to infiltrate. But they're saying it in a genuine conversation. They're like, they're not having a pop at me or, people, predecessing governments. They're just basically saying, as things are now,
yes,
we don't need something like this, but this is a bad thing for them. So the ones I know aren't keen on it, and this is more for a government than actually for a Muslim.
Really interesting points there, Kevin and Leicester. Thanks for that. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Petri Hoskin in a few minutes' time about what's coming on her programme between 10 and 1 this evening. And don't forget, a full hour of calls between 10 and 1 during the Talk Back section. Let me just read out a couple of messages before we go to our next caller, Karen in Bournemouth. Leslie in Rugby says, Free Speech Union collectively funding to take the government to court to reverse their decision on this Islamophobia definition. You can find it on their website. Thank you for that. Ernie says, you say vote for a party that will decide to overthrow the scrapping of juries next time. There won't be a party to vote for if there are more policies like these passed. And a very nice one from Charlotte, who says, I love listening to you, Peter. You talk sense, you care, and you always are always willing to respectfully listen to everyone's view. Well, Charlotte, what a lovely message. Thank you. Let's go to Karen in Bournemouth now on Islamophobia. Karen, what do you think? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter.
Hi
I think this is the most dangerous step towards Islamification of this country that we've had so far, because it's a complete defenestration of the police powers and the judiciary. Because take the policewoman that was in Whitechapel the other day that wouldn't arrest the preacher.
Yes.
Yes. Well, she would have been done for Islamophobia because they would have started screaming that because she refused to arrest the preacher, she was being Islamophobic.
Well, she was being very brave, actually, Karen. She was saying there are no Muslim areas, there are no Christian areas, there are just areas. We share this country together, and there is this thing called free speech, and you're allowed to criticise religion, and unless you're being overtly racist and racially agitating and saying things and being a threat to people, well, actually, you're allowed to criticise Islam, you're allowed to criticise Christianity. That's what free speech is.
It is, but it's also because you're defenestrating our legal system altogether, on top of this jury trial situation, then, you know, police would be losing their jobs left, right and centre, or they'd be kept quiet. The judges wouldn't dare say, you know, not guilty.
Well, it's worse than that, Karen, as well, because there's so much we wouldn't see. There'd be so many police officers who say, do you know what, I just don't want to, I want to have a quiet life. I want to do what I'm told specifically on this legislation. So, I mean, it's their rule to implement the law. I totally get that. But I just wonder how many police officers there would be like that young woman, very, very brave officer there, who said, actually, hold on a second, no, we're not going to arrest anybody. We're not going to tell anybody to shut up, because this is free speech. This is not a Muslim area. This is just an area. In the same way there aren't Christian areas, there aren't Sikh areas, there aren't Jewish areas, there are just areas that everybody shares together. Karen?
Well, that's the problem, you see, because what they're doing is already dividing up, and what will I fear that what will happen is that come 2029, we won't actually have an election, because the whole area, I mean, you've got parts of Birmingham are already Islamified.
Well, in fairness, Karen, to Reform UK, they certainly brought that piece of that legal action, which meant that those council elections were brought back on the 7th of May, and well done for them for doing so and making sure that democracy will actually happen after the Labour government's ludicrous decision to postpone and cancel some of those elections. Karen, thank you. Just before we go to Peter Hoskin and find out what's happening in her programme, I want to speak to Cindy, who is in Michigan in the United States, and I know you want to talk about Nigel Farage. Cindy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter, I love your show and keep speaking up for animals.
Thank you.
You're wonderful. And Nigel Farage, yes, I feel that, you know, he was being honest, because you don't have the equipment. What on earth could you possibly do right now?
Do you, as an American, feel? Do you, as an American, Cindy, feel that we in the UK should be more supportive towards what President Trump is doing? And how can we do that if we don't have that equipment, as you say?
Oh yes, definitely yes. Because what I feel that Keir Starmer should do is spend more money on defense, less on welfare, less cut it down. He's just trying to practically buy his Labour voters. He's doing it with the Muslims, and he's doing it with welfare.
And what sort of a job do you think President Trump is doing on Iran?
He says the war is practically over. I'm a little bit skeptical of how he's going to wrap this up.
I know what you mean, and Pete Hegseth seems to be saying something a little bit different. He seems to be saying that actually, I mean, it was interesting. A reporter said, you said to Donald Trump, said, you said the war is very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it? And he said you could say both. I mean, that's a bit confusing, is it not?
That's not an answer. Oh my God. You know what? I actually watch talk more than I watch Americans. So
okay.
I gotta.
Well, good for you, Cindy. Good for you. And listen, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Cindy is clearly a woman of great taste, eschewing the American networks and instead tuning in to talk. And she'll be in for a treat if she does so for the next 3 hours, because Peter Hoskin is with us. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well indeed. How are you?
I'm very well. Your jumper tonight has a red-green alliance?
Yes, yeah. I thought, well, why not? I don't pick a political side. I just hate all of them.
Yes, yes. As so many of us often do.
Like so many of us often do. Coming up, we're going to be talking about this declaration of sorts by Donald Trump about it. You know, the war was getting pretty close, and then he changed his mind again and said it wasn't. The end of the war is getting pretty close. But it's very difficult to see the end of the war because it seems like Iran doesn't agree. Israel doesn't agree. So if Donald Trump's saying that, what are the others saying, and why are they saying it? And is it just going to go back to, well, you know, war happened, Iran's just going to go, right, we'll just rebuild now? I don't see that happening. And of course, Donald Trump's furious that Israel has been bombing the oil fields in Iran as well, because he was hoping to come up with a deal on the oil, always looking for the deal.
And of course, so much of it about China as well, and their natural resources and what they need. I did a fascinating interview about that last night, actually. And China as well have decided they will take Taiwan during Xi's reign, and he's quite old, so we're looking at Taiwan as well as being a major issue in all of this, because China's just counting down all the missiles as they're fired by America to see how many they've got left. We're also going to be looking at jury trials. I'm so disappointed today about the MPs voted, because you're going to get a lot of calls on this.
This is an absolute disgrace. This has been hundreds of years. This has been our right to a jury trial. I can't see it going through the Lords. I really can't. But nonetheless, who are these MPs and who are they working for? Us or Keir Starmer?
Well, also, what about Carl Turner, who came out, the Labour MP, talked about how it was such a dreadful thing. Tad has actually been in touch on this. He says, imagine the scenario, Peter. A magistrate presides over a case where ordinarily a jury would sit in deliberation. The accused gets a lenient sentence or walks free. It then transpires that both the magistrate and the accused belong to the same ethnic group. Sound far-fetched? Lemmy needs to think again, because he is playing with fire. There's so many people who think there's a playing with fire in all of this.
Absolutely playing with fire. So we're going to be looking at that. I've got a fantastic criminal defence barrister for that.